Commission meeting. The first item is public comment for items not listed on the agenda. Do we have any people from the public that would like to comment on any items not on the agenda tonight? Seeing no one, we'll move to item number 3, adoption of Planning Commission minutes for February 28th, 2011. Has the commission had a chance to review the minutes? Is there any discussion about the minutes, or can I ask for a motion?
I have one. I just want to make sure that when the minutes are officially adopted, that the spacing for the roll call isn't out of order like it is in the print. Just
Right, we'll make a correction so that that reads properly, because there's a tab.
I mean, it's something very simple, but when Word starts thinking for you, who knows? So with that correction of the tabbing for the call to order, I move that we approve the minutes for February 28th.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the minutes for February 28th, 2011.
Commissioner Kidwell?
Aye.
Commissioner Espy?
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff?
Aye.
Commissioner Mabey?
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin? Chair Stein?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next, our Planning Commission hearings. I would like to suggest to the Planning Commissioners that we have item B, the annexation for Park Place, first, and do the courthouse addition second tonight. Would everybody agree to that?
That's fine. Sure.
No objection.
Any objection?
For what?
We have people who would like to speak.
Oh,
We have
I see.
people here that would
We
probably
like,
not prefer to wait.
we like people.
Okay, great. Therefore, 2 public hearings on land use applications are scheduled tonight. A staff report has been prepared. For each application has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. Staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the Commission will follow is set out in state law and Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart to my right. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city will notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they're not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issues precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now we'll open the record for Oregon City File Number AN 1101, Park Place Annexation, 6.5 acres. Does any commissioner have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statements to declare? I know the applicant from community meetings, and I was a participant in the Park Place concept planning process. So I don't have any bias, and I don't have any interest in the outcome of this hearing. So If any of the commissioners have any questions for me, be happy to answer them.
Or the public.
If any of the public has any questions for me, be happy to answer. Has any of the commissioners visited the site?
I indirectly visited the site about 3 years ago when the plan was being put forward. We walked through the whole concept plan area. I don't know if I was even specifically at this location, but it's part of the concept plan thing, so I have a rough idea of what the terrain and everything is around it, but that's it.
I looked at it from the end. I mean, with a street named Cattle Drive, I had to go check it out.
My wife works at Holcomb Elementary, and I go up there fairly frequently to pick her up or see her. So I've seen the site.
I too have walked through the area, gone through the end of the road that extends into the area. And it's as described in the staff's document.
Just driven through the area.
Okay.
No.
We'll now commence with the planning staff report.
Thank you, Chair Stein, and good evening, Commissioners. It's been a long time since I've been before you, and welcome to the new Commissioners. I think the last time I was up here, we were talking about the Abernathy Chapel. So this is a little bit different application, and I'll do my best to get through it and answer any questions you have in a expedient way. This annexation is part of the area for the Park Place concept plan, and the Park Place concept plan area is approximately 480 acres in size. This is known as, this 6.5 acre piece is part of the North Village area, which I'll go into briefly. The area is relatively flat. If you've been to Cattle Drive, you've probably noticed it was overgrown, unless it's been cut since I visited the site. There's a lot of overgrown blackberries there right now, some scattered trees on the property, and you've got 3 street stubs into the site from the Cattle Drive, Shartner Drive, and Journey Drive. The area has been part of 2 previous annexation proposals, one in 2007 and one in 2009, fairly recently. The applications were submitted to the city. The one in 2007 was consisted of 2 separate annexation areas. So I think one was about 70 acres. I could be wrong. The other was about 90. The subsequent application was for about, let's see, I think about 60 acres, and this proposal before you was 6.5 acres. In all 3 applications that went before the Planning Commission and subsequently to the City Commission, they were approved through the city process, and then they were forwarded along to the voters for approval by a vote, and were subsequently denied, because that's part of the Oregon City Charter. Voters can approve or deny an annexation following the city process. This proposal is on a parcel that is part of the medium-density residential comprehensive plan designation. When we adopted the Park Place concept plan, we also adopted zoning to implement the Park Place concept plan. The applicant has only proposed annexation with this submittal. They are not proposing a default zoning with the application. If it was zoned by default upon approval today, it would get an R5 zoning designation, which is a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. And if it was developed under that designation, you could probably put about between 30 and 35 homes on a parcel this size, not including, and that's taking out land for streets and storm ponds if need be. So what's being proposed tonight is strictly a 6.5 acre application. In order to approve this, the application must meet the approval criteria in Chapter 1404, 060 of the Oregon City Municipal Code. And those criteria, there are 7 criteria, including adequacy of access to the site, compliance with comprehensive plan goals and policies for annexation and urbanization, including the Park Place concept plan. The third criteria is that there be adequate public facilities and services to serve the site, which includes water, utilities, sewer, and also police, fire, and schools. The application also needs to meet Oregon Revised Statute 222, which is primarily a contiguity requirement. This property has contiguous subdivisions in Oregon City on both sides. It also needs to meet Metro Code, Chapter 3.09, for boundary changes. The fifth and sixth criteria for approval are that any natural hazards on the property be identified and planned for, and natural resources such as wetlands, any water quality areas, significant natural habitat be identified. And finally, that the annexation will not result in significant adverse impact to any physical, social, or environmental quality of the city. We've outlined how this application complies with those criteria in the staff report in detail. A big part of my staff report goes through the goals and policies in the comprehensive plan. And I'd be happy to go into those in more detail. Essentially, the one criteria that has been identified as a shortcoming with respect to criteria number 3, adequate public facilities and services, is a police service shortcoming. Oregon City currently has a 1.3 officers per 1,000 population, and the police department has a goal of 4-minute emergency response, 7 to 9 minute actual, and 20-minute non-emergency response times. And due to a lack of resources, our emergency response time is around 9 minutes, and so there would be some impact to police services upon annexation. And so the applicant, in recognition of that, has proposed to pay a $3,500 per dwelling unit police service fee for any new home developed within the annexation area. And we attached the draft annexation agreement for that police service fee as Exhibit 7. As you go through the staff report, you'll notice a lot of references to natural resources, parks, open space, and those kinds of areas. The North Village Plan, which I will show up here. This diagram, which is an exhibit, let's see. Exhibit 3. Shows the final adopted final concept plan for the Park Place area. You can see just to the northeast of this quarter-mile radius map is the area proposed for annexation.
Can you point to it specifically?
You did.
Oh, well, it didn't show a dot on mine. It just.
Oh, okay. You might be looking at the
Oh.
exhibit. I've got the screen up. And you
Okay,
can toggle
yeah, I am
between
looking
the
at your
screen
exhibit. Oh, okay.
and your exhibit.
I couldn't see the little.
Can you see that
His
now?
pointer's
Yeah.
a fine
Okay.
crosshair.
Your point. Oh, okay. I
Right
was looking for an
there.
arrow,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I saw no arrow. Okay.
Yeah. So you can see that it's northeast of the Livesey Road area, which is envisioned to become a mixed-use, more high-density area with the surrounding areas developed as residential primarily. The park area that I was referring to is conceptually shown around here, and it would be between 3.5 to 5 acres.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
For the TV audience, it's the big green blob on the.
Yeah,
you can't
that's
see
right.
the little arrow moving around.
Of the approximately 480 acres in this concept plan, Only about 109, 110 of it were determined to be developable due to the presence of steep slopes, wetlands, streams, and other natural constraints. Within that net developable area, Metro requires the city to adopt an implementing zoning that will accomplish overall 10 units per acre within the annexation area. And this is realized through the R5 zoning and also through an R3.5 zoning, and it was a comprehensive plan designation, not zoning. It is up to the applicant to apply to the city separately for zoning and subdivision of this property if it is approved for annexation. The reason why the annexation proposal is disconnected from the zoning is because of the transportation planning rule, which is a statewide planning rule that requires that there be adequate state public facilities that serve development. And when a zone change is proposed within the metro area, ODOT comments on applications and requires that there be no net impact at the end of a 20-year planning horizon. I'm getting into the details of this transportation planning rule, but essentially, if you do not show compliance with the TPR, transportation planning rule, they will not recommend approval of the zone change. And the last application deferred the TPR compliance until the time of zoning. And so this is exactly the same proposal. They're not doing TPR compliance yet. They will propose a transportation planning rule compliance and have to do the analysis for that in the future when the zoning is proposed. Until any development proposal is in place, the TPR analysis cannot be completed. What the TPR analysis will, what we have done as a city as far as the TPR analysis is we've looked at off-site impacts for the entire Park Place area. We've adopted the estimated infrastructure improvements into our system development charge structure and into our recently passed transportation impact fees. Our new park updates to our park system development charges and our other development charges. Those are paid at the time of building permit, and I think the current fee for transportation is about $7,500 per single-family unit. That's in addition to any building permit fees that are required to be paid and any other system development charges. And the city has relied upon that capital improvement plan to show that we are in compliance with our traffic transportation system plan, and but we cannot rely solely upon those SDCs yet to show TPR compliance. The applicant will have to come forward with a detailed transportation impact analysis at the time of zoning in order to show that. So currently, we've got 3 local streets stubbed into the site. Those local streets all meet our minimum local street standard of 53 feet. Water, sewer, and stormwater connections are all stubbed into the site and can be extended through the site without having to make any significant expenditures off-site, so that all of the infrastructure connections can be made on-site and not require any things like pump stations or other expensive exterior infrastructure improvements. And the developer would be responsible for building all of those. The area is all served by Clackamas Fire District Number 1, which we annexed into the Clackamas Fire District some years back, and subsequently we don't need to make any service district changes with respect to fire. We do need to de-annex from the Clackamas Enhanced Emergency District, because Clackamas Sheriff's Department currently serves this area, and that would be part of the recommendations of the City Commission. The Planning Commission is primarily making a finding with respect to those 7 factors I referred to earlier. And staff has found that the applicant meets those, all of those criteria for approval of the annexation. And as long as the recommendations are forwarded along to the City Commission, as I've discussed, and I can go through, staff is recommending approval of this annexation. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have about this report.
Commissioner Maybe.
Yeah, my first question is, looking at the tax law, which is
yes.
sample 2 or exhibit 2, that indicates that this is a 13.3 acre lot, and yet we're only talking about 6 acres. And I don't see a tax lot division there, so what 6 acres are we annexing?
Right.
Proposed, because we're not annexing
Well-
anything.
Right. So tax lot 180 is actually, the 6.5 acres is actually part of 2 discontiguous, actually 6.5 acres of a 13.5 acre tax lot. The other portion of it is to the southwest, where I'm down here.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with that as far as tax assessment goes. There is an issue with that with respect to subsequent development, whether the applicant wants to build a house on that. They will need to either apply to the county for partition of the 6.5 acres prior to the annexation approval or post-annexation approval. There are actually four separate tax lots involved in the lot of record of which the 6.5 acres belongs. And the Clackamas County planner, Rick McIntyre, looked at this and said, well, you can do this as long as in the future, if they are coming in for a subdivision, the 6.5 acres is split off as a separate subdivision, and the additional part of what tax lot 180 is called out as a tract or non-developable until the time of future subdivision. And the county would sign off on the final plat for that, and that would meet the county survey standards.
So how do we identify these as opposed to, lot 180 down in the lower corner? I mean, what's to have them not come back and say, actually, since it's 6 acres, I'm going to choose these 6 acres down here instead.
Good question.
I mean, it's the same tax lot with the same identification number. Shouldn't they be partitioned by the county and get different identifiers prior to their being annexed?
Well, they've turned in a legal description, which the county has, looked at and stamped and said the legal description is appropriate for annexation purposes. We have recommended that they fully comply with any county recommendations and any requirements to record deeds and turn in all the deeds for this piece of tax lot 180 in order to process the annexation fully and legally to the Department of Revenue. With respect to having a fully surveyed and partitioned parcel in order to complete the annexation, it doesn't appear to be a requirement. I would refer you to the exhibit number 11. We'll go through that once it loads. So pursuant to the county, it is possible to partition the northerly 6.5 acres from the remainder of the property along the county's zoning and comprehensive plan boundary. This could be done either pre or post annexation, but the latter would require dual applications similar to another partition we did on Leland Road. The applicant does not have a specific development plan in mind, but if they did, we could agree to let, this county could let us take the lead on a post-annexation subdivision application with the remainder that is not annexed platted as a tract reserved for future development. But I would defer to the city attorney on the legal aspects of that. It doesn't appear to be an issue at this
Okay.
time. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that I understand the whole annexation process. So
Right.
if, for instance, I owned a piece of property right on the city's border, and I decided I only wanted to annex my front yard but leave my house and backyard out, I could do that even though it's one big tax lot?
Well,
I mean,
we would try to annex as much of the property as we could. I think with a structure on the property is a little different situation. This is a vacant 6.5 acre parcel.
Your front yard would have to meet the city's current zoning, or whatever zoning was in place on the property.
so if I had an R10 yard, but I'm in an R3.5 zone, I could just bring in the 3.5 acres in my front yard and live.
Yes. But you'd have to go through a partition process before you could develop your front yard.
Okay.
It-
But I
it
could have
could
half
be-
my yard in the city and half of it out.
You could.
Oh, joy.
Which part is the 6.5 acres?
Oh, it's this highlighted area?
Yeah, three.
Yeah,
Right here.
okay. I just want to make sure, because I figured that out by looking at all the little arrows, and I said, well, that's one really big tax lot,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
lot
it
of
is.
record, I guess, with different tax lots.
You're right.
The other part of this is 6.5 acres. You said in your remarks that conceivably this could get zoned as R3.5, which is 10 lots per acre, which means you could have 60 lots.
You said,
You
The
said 3.5.
medium-density residential comp plan designation does support an R35 zoning. I don't believe the applicant is interested in doing that right away, but, they could propose that. The R35 designation does allow for single-family designation, single-family detached development, which is, significantly denser than R5, yeah.
I guess I'd like to point out that the comprehensive plan designation has already been adopted by the city. It's medium-density residential. The applicant needs to come in and show compliance just to get the R5 zoning. Now, they could certainly request R3.5, and they'd still need to meet all the standards for a comprehensive plan map, or for a zone change that would be associated with that. The request is to bring in a vacant piece of property at this point.
Yeah, and
Keep it at county zoning as
Right.
well, yeah.
And then according to the comprehensive plan, this piece of property would actually benefit in that the three stubs would become a connected figure eight, basically. So if the police were to respond to something, they wouldn't have to go all the way out and up and over and back and around and down. They just go down and around the corner. Based on the way I see Cattle Drive would join with Journey, which would join with, and so it would actually kind of complete the square. Is that what
Well-
would be the outcome of because it's already in the...
Yeah, the concept plan shows some conceptual alignments that do that. The city's subdivision code requires that streets be fully stubbed out to the adjacent properties and that they be connected if there is the capability to do so. So we would definitely be reviewing any subdivision proposal for compliance with those requirements. We're not going to be doing that right now, but it's certainly supported by the concept plan and by the zoning that we have in place. There's nothing on the parcel that would constrain it from doing a fully connected street system at full right-of-way widths. It's relatively flat. Yeah.
Let somebody else point out. Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions from the commission?
I was just wondering if you had in your papers there, thing I didn't see was a topo map.
Oh, yes. We didn't include an exhibit with a topo map because it wasn't really called out as being over 25%, which is typically what we want to, what triggers any kind of steep slope or hazard concern. So no, there's no contour map in there. I think it's varies from about 5 to 15 degrees, and sort of falls off to the southwest because it drains into.
Where the little cluster of
There's a
trees is
drain.
towards the backside there.
I think it drains to the southwest. Yeah, down toward Livesey Road.
Well, it would be great if in the future, if we could get any more of these, which I don't think there'll be a big rush for these, but it would be, whether it's 25% or more, just to have one in the packet, because, I'm looking out there and I don't know whether, it looks flat, but I don't,
Right.
I can't verify that.
Yeah, and we've got LiDAR data, so it shoots through the trees and you can see what the grade is underneath. Yeah, so we can do that for sure.
Yeah, somewhere in here there was and I don't remember who it was, said it was a 5% grade or 5% slope from the northwest to the southeast.
Oh, yeah, overall.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Espy?
Is this annexation within one sewer boundary or one sewer district? Sewer
The
basin
city,
district?
it's not within the Clackamas River Water District. It was part of the old Clark
It's in
Place
Tri-Cities, I know that.
Oh,
but-
sorry, the sewer
but-
district.
Yeah, but I was wondering if it was in, a contiguous sewer basin.
It's
And then
actu-
my follow-up question to that is, are there any pump stations up at that subdivision, and would there be additional upsizing of those existing pump stations to annex this property? I'm kind of more into the public facilities availability
Right.
aspect of this, so
I know the larger area was within 2 drainage basins, and but I think this 6.5 acres falls within just one.
yeah, I couldn't remember if these subdivisions gravity fed down to, Livesey or Redland Road, or if they pumped up to Holcomb.
I think it will, once it connects through, it will not require any further pump stations to go up and connect through to Trailview subdivision.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
according to Bob Cullison, our city engineer.
okay, good.
Yep.
Other questions? Thank you, Pete.
You're welcome.
Oh, I have one quick one more.
I'm sorry, Pete.
Pete,
We have one more
do you
question
happen to
for you
know
from
where,
Commissioner McGriff.
on Livesey Road, if this is the section of Livesey Road where the historic Livesey house is, and what the relationship of that is to this parcel? Not that there's any effect. You'll just give me in my
Right.
head a better.
Christina, do you know whether, I know this parcel doesn't have where it sits in relation to that house. That's a good question.
The Livesey house?
Yeah, I don't know, looking at that tax map, I might have to get back.
I didn't know if it was, I couldn't remember if it
Here's
was on this
Livesey
tax
Road.
map or it was further over,
Here's Frank Lane.
right.
It's way down to the
think it's
lower
lower.
left-hand corner, and I don't even think it's on this map.
I didn't think
Yeah,
it was.
pull
Okay.
up the concept plan one. That'll give us the reference.
Okay, good idea. All right, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Ooh.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
The other end.
All right. So here's Livesey where it takes the jog,
Yeah.
and then
I thought it was in there somewhere.
I assume it's somewhere around
Yeah,
here.
okay, that's where I
Yeah.
thought it was. Okay.
Okay. And that, yeah, so that's about a quarter mile.
It's bad when you know where things are by where somebody's historic house is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other questions? No, thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have the applicant's presentation.
Work the computer? Do you need it? Yeah, there's a couple of things I want. I was wondering if you could put the one on my applicant statement that shows the very last map is the actual topographic.
Oh, okay, sure.
Ooh, membrane structures.
That's right there, yeah.
Oh, I remember we had.
No, it's really slow. It'd be nice if you could make it go up and down easier.
We're just trying to find that.
There we go. Yeah, it's at the end of Exhibit 5.
Yeah, that did kind of help me though. So,
There it is. Okay. Yep.
My name is Brian O'Brien. I'm a planning consultant. I'm representing the property owner in this case. And I also have Kent Ziegler in the audience that's also is involved with this property. His brother actually owns the property, but Kent is actively involved in managing the development. And he'll speak a little bit after me. But I wanted to look at this exhibit real quick because if you notice on the north end of the northeast corner, we have an elevation of 420 feet. And at the very southwest corner, should I show you on the map here? If you see this area right down in here, this is at a 390-foot elevation, and this is 420-foot elevation, which is basically 30 feet grade differential, and it's about 600 feet from here to here, to these corners. So that's average of 5%. This area up in here, generally about 2 to 3%. It's just that it averages from here to here at 5%. So it's pretty flat, pretty easy piece of property to develop. I don't want to get in, I don't have too many things to discuss really, other just to answer some of the questions that were brought up here. We'd like to hear the property owners that are in the area that comment, and then we'd like to make some comments afterwards. Two things, or several things actually. We have no intention of doing R3.5 zoning. We fully intend to do the R5 zoning, which is basically required. That's the lowest zoning that we can do on this property because it is designated medium density residential. We think that'd be more compatible with the neighborhood. And excuse me, I got a phone. I don't have this. I don't have this exhibit, a small one, but I just wanted to show you real quickly that this is the property. You see we have 3 street stubs. Those streets would stub to the south. There would be Hawley Lane when it develops in the future, and this would eventually go in this area. Real steep slopes right in this area. The important thing about this is that it eliminates the dead ends that you have in the area. You have a looping water line system, and you'll also provide an access when this area develops so you can get back up into here. So here's your secondary access so you can service this whole area. Because this entire subdivision only has one access on a main road, and it really should have 2 accesses. And I've talked to the Zieglers, and they've indicated that we have a road from Livesay Road. There is a gravel road up to 2 dwellings up in this area, and they plan on developing if they can get this property annexed and developed, that they will provide some type of gravel system down to this road so that Livesay gets a secondary access, because Livesay does flood out and you can't get in there. So this way it would be a way to get in a secondary access for the area. So anyhow, this is our first step. We wish we could annex a lot more property. I'll show this here so that people can see it. But as you know, the voter annexation has prevented us. We're just hoping that with only 6 acres that they'll go along with it. We agree that if we're required to do a partition in order to subdivide the property, we'll do that. However, we've talked to the county surveyors about this, and actually there's an ORS law regarding these, is that if you're doing a subdivision, which we're planning on doing on this particular property, you're not required to include the entire piece of property. You can subdivide a portion of a property. If you're doing a partition, which is 2 to 3 lots, then you have to include the entire piece of property. So the county surveyor is fairly comfortable with doing this. In fact, we're doing one right now in Happy Valley. We've got a large piece of property, and we're phasing the project. And our first phase is just 9 lots, and we're not required to subdivide the entire piece. The logic behind that is that if you had a 100-acre piece of land, you're not required, and you're only going to do 10 acres for subdivision lots, you're not required to make the other 90 acres one of the subdivision lots, or a tract. You just do 10 acres, and then you do another 10 acres, and another 10 acres. So, like I said, we'll do it either way, but we feel very confident that with the county surveyor that we have the ORS behind us, that we can actually subdivide this and not have to separate it from the rest of the property. Pete, how do I get back to the tax map? I wanted to talk about that real quick. Just give you a little back history of how that property got created in the first place. Something that you can't do today. Originally, this piece of property, as you can see, I'm kind of squiggling right there, was part of a much larger piece of land for the whole area. What happened is that this piece got subdivided off, this piece got subdivided off, and different things, and this just happened to be the remaining piece, and this is the remaining piece. Originally, it was all one big piece of property in the area, and nobody ever looked at that. That's, of course, when partitioning ordinance probably in Clackamas County probably came out in the 70s, but this was done way before that, probably in the 40s or the 50s. So that's the reason we have this situation. And when you look at annexation boundaries, the city can pretty much annex any property they see is reasonable, and we think that since this is totally isolated from this property, and this property, this tax lot 100, is a separate ownership, has a separate mortgages and everything, that this is a very logical boundary. And when we do our boundary survey for this property, we'll have to identify these perimeter lines. We've got subdivisions on the north side and the east side, so that's pretty easy. So that will be fairly easy to determine what that is, and then this will just end up being the remaining piece. So that's how the back history, but I think we can do it either way. If we're required to do a partition, we'll do that. There's septic tank failures already along Livesay Road. There needs to be a master plan to get sewers into this area. However, our particular piece of property, we have sewers adjacent to our site that we can use, so we don't have to extend any sewers long distances. When you get to other phases to the south, there's going to have to be some big, large sewer system. It's going to have to go all the way out to the large trunk lines, the 48-inch trunk lines that are, well, that's Highway 212, I think, or 213. What's the name of the highway?
213?
215. 215?
213,
excuse me, yeah, 213. There's a large trunk line at 213, and you're going to have to take the sewer line all the way out to that area. So that's long-term down the road. That's not going to happen right away. But those property owners out there have already had some problems with their septic tanks, and they need water. They also need water lines. So this is kind of like a first step for that area to at least get this part going. Let's see. I don't think I have any other. I don't think I have any more comments. I think I pretty much addressed them. I'd like to hear what the neighbor has to say, and then we'll go ahead and comment from there.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a few questions?
Am I limited to the 3 minutes, or am I part of his presentation? Just so I kind of...
I understood that you were part of the applicant's presentation.
Okay, good, great. I appreciate it. Trying to figure out where everybody can see this. I can set it over there. Here's a little bit more of a aerial visual to what Ryan was alluding to there. Kind of allow everybody to see how it all connects. So, first of all, my name is Kent Ziegler. I live at 25020.
Just Oregon City, you're not in
Oh, okay. Westland, Oregon, but own quite a bit of property in Oregon City. have owned it for quite a while, I'm afraid to say. And I see some familiar faces here on the commission. See some new faces, so looking forward to hopefully getting to know all of you better over the years to come. As Ryan alluded, obviously we've been working on this for a long time, about 10 years now. I was on the advisory board committee for the Park Place concept plan, as were some of you that are sitting here on the commission. I personally have probably attended over 35 either neighborhood outreach meetings, public hearings with the planning commission, public hearings with the city council, public hearings with the Metro board on coming up with what was eventually approved by Metro and the city and the county as a concept plan for the Park Place area. For numerous reasons, obviously, we've decided just to scale back and incrementally go forward with the implementation of the Park Place Concept Plan. There's a lot of reasons why this particular parcel makes the most sense for it to be the initial phase. First of all, it has 3 roads stubbed into it. Obviously, the planning department for the city of Oregon City anticipated that this property would be developed. It was brought into the urban growth boundary in the 1980s. One of the reasons I have to imagine that the planning staff allowed only one ingress and egress off of Holcomb for the existing subdivisions that are in Oregon City was that they anticipated that these stub roads would eventually be extended. Because in talking with the planning staff last week, they said right now that would not get approved, what the city has already in existence. That's in violation of your present codes. So what we're trying to do is address that violation so that we can provide a secondary emergency vehicle access. And I think what you can see from what Pete's showing there, you can see the 3 roads that are stubbed in from Trail View, which is on the right, and Pacific Lifestyle Homes called Wasco Acres just above. And then eventually we'll go on out to Livesey Road in a future annexation, or we can go ahead and try to provide a interim gravel access through George Thomas's property, which is just to the right of my sheet of paper there that says Park Place Plan provides. It's critical that this gets done not only for the existing City of Oregon City subdivisions, because there was a house that burned down in that subdivision not too long ago, and I'm thinking, well, what would have happened if the only way in and out would have been blocked? Would it have spread to other houses? And as Ryan alluded to, Livesey, from time to time in the wintertime, the Abernathy Creek floods. And Mr. Thomas has given testimony in front of the Planning Commission before and the City Council. He wanted to be here tonight, but unfortunately he thinks he has throat cancer. He lives in that White House. He almost died of a heart attack because Livesey Road had 3 feet of water on it at that time, and his daughter was able to drive him through the water to get to the hospital. He now introduced this into the record. He actually had his water line tested on June 1st of 2010 by Alexan Analytical Laboratories in Tigard, and their comments are, water tastes bad, smells bad, water line is an asbestos pipe from the 1940s. Well, this is the City of Oregon City water line. So the City of Oregon City went ahead and hired Black & Veatch to go ahead and do a evaluation of how to go ahead and resolve this public safety hazard. And it was basically, I'll read to you that. The Livesey pump station provides water to a small surface area. When the pressure in the tanks falls below 70 psi, the pump turns on until the pressure reaches 100 psi. Historically, there have been several occasions where the pump motor is burned up, and the city personnel have reported that the station breaks down often. Well, then from that point on, the city sent out a letter on January 27th. Although this water line would be temporary until development of this area occurs, such a water line would require the city obtain temporary construction easements, permit utility easements, and a permit of entry from all owners of property on the new water line would be located. In the summer of 2009, the city hired an engineering consultant, Black & Veatch, to prepare the alternative analysis. As a result of the alternative analysis, the city is now looking at the possibility of abandoning the existing pump station and extending the water line in Wasco Acres, the subdivision I referenced, to the south to serve customers currently served by the pump station. Well, there were 2 issues with this. One, they were going to be temporary easements. And we're going, well, why do you want to do a temporary easement when if you just allow this area to be annexed, we can go ahead and build the roads and put the water line in a permanent location so it doesn't have to be ripped out later on. So then you look at, well, what was the cost of that? The budgetary cost of a package pump station that provides service flow is only $380,000. The cost of a package pump station that provides service flow as well as fire flow is $470,000. It was assumed that either of these alternatives would require basic maintenance. Assuming one operator spends 4 hours per week maintaining the pump station, the operational cost for this alternative is approximately $12,500 per year. This is from Black & Veatch on January 29th of 2010. So that was going to cost City of Oregon City citizens citizens of your city anywhere from $380,000 to $470,000, and then it might just be a temporary line that gets removed. So we're going, well, what, in this era of economic issues and trying to provide public services for the citizens of your community, why not let the landowners pay for that? We're not looking for any urban renewal funding. We're not looking for any subsidies. We just want to be a landowner that pays our fair share, and not only pays our fair share, but saves the citizens of Oregon City conceivably up to $500,000 in the cost of this water line by allowing us to just go ahead and install it in a permanent location rather than a temporary location. So that's with the water line. Then you look at, well, how long is this road that serves these homes that are being served by this 40-year-old asbestos water line? So I have my surveyor, Buckle and Associates, who lives on Livesey. So does the fire chief for Clackamas Fire District lives on there. Ed Kirchhoffer has requested the approximate distance along South Livesey Road from South Redland Road to the north end of Frank Road, which is where Mr. Thomas lives, just to the left of the annexed area. It's 5,740 feet. Well, in talking with planning staff, they said the maximum distance for a dead-end cul-de-sac in Oregon City right now is 350 feet. We're over a mile long as a dead end, with no way in and out other than that dead end. To me, it just seems so obvious as to why this makes sense. There's 3 roads stubbed in, all utilities are stubbed in, the city's in violation of their own code with the existing subdivisions that are there. We're willing to pay for it. We save the citizens close to $500,000 in a water line improvement that the property owners pay for. We create jobs. It just seems to me, I fail to see a reason why it's not a good idea. So anyway, that's kind of the gist of my story, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the commission? Thank you, Mr. Ziegler.
Okay, thank you. And I can submit copies of this into the record.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
You've redlined a kind of a conceptual master plan for the street system there.
Yes.
Do you guys have any alternative plans that you've been thinking about that would eliminate the access to Livesey Road if no other property were able to be annexed south of that property?
Well, basically, Livesey, for the most part, was going to just be a totally secondary access. The main connection from Redland to Holcomb in the master concept plan that was approved by Metro has us extend to Holly.
Okay.
Up the hill. So, right. And so we kind of traverse across the contours and then come down where Holly is.
Right.
So a good part of the existing homes on Livesey right now would not be involved in this.
Okay.
That would just be served as secondary. The one thing I would say, though, and Ryan's done a sewer analysis for the entire area, it'd make a lot of sense to run an LID for a new sewer line right down Livesey Road, because there are a lot of homes that, as he mentioned, have failing septic tanks in that area. And we can, by what we're doing here, we could start that process and then help address that public safety hazard that exists. But you wouldn't need to use it for road access, just for sewer access.
Okay, and I guess this is a question for city staff. When was the last time the city participated in an LID? Has it been recent? Has there been any recent LIDs? No. Would you be willing to entertain a zone of benefit?
You know?
A zone of benefit, a ZOB, where maybe it's under a different name here, but where you would construct the sewer and then charge everybody an incremental cost for connecting.
As a latecomer type thing.
Right.
Yeah, obviously we're willing to consider just about any type of financing method that's available in this economic environment.
I'm just thinking in terms of LIDs not being as palatable as other means of providing sewer in those areas, and just exploring alternatives.
Right. No, he said I've been doing this for 30 years, so.
Sure.
Go
Can
ahead.
I answer that question? Let's see if I can get it better. I can't read any of this stuff. Can you help me here, Pete? Just get on that concept plan again? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can tell from there. This is probably pretty easy for me to show. This property up here, this is what we're annexing. This property can get gravity sewer. All the rest of this property down here, the whole thing, all requires sewer. Here's Livesay Road. It'll have to go down through here, here, and out, and right here is where the big 48-inch trunk line is. So if we're gonna build, and Kent, as you know, is how many, 150 acres old?
Approximately.
Kent with his different groups, has control of about 150 acres. There are multiple ownerships, but in this area. So in order for us to develop this area, we have to extend a sewer line all the way down there, and we are planning on doing exactly what you're saying, either an LID or we'll construct it with a payback from all the property owners that benefit in this area. And we've already talked to some of these other property owners, got some bigger acreages in here, and there is some intent that they'll want to develop if the sewer becomes available.
Yeah.
And the reason why the Livesay Road works are pretty good is because with about a 15-foot deep sewer, and maybe you can basically serve all these properties in here, that there is a real distinct edge where it just drops off, and so we can
You
tell.
can see the green
See
next
that
to the
green area?
stream.
That's just a drop off. It's a big canyon, and there's also this area right here has the slopes go right up to almost 50%.
Yeah.
So there's a real definitive line. We can bring the sewer line up through here, and about this point right here, you can see where I'm talking about. At this area, the sewer would then come around this way to serve up this area, but our sewer would come up through here, and basically will serve the entire area. Now, we've also looked at taking sewer lines across this canyon into here. We can do that also as another option, but we can only serve this area right here. We can go across this canyon. We can follow the grade, go like this, then come back and go into here, and then we'd have to upgrade the lines in Holcomb, and that will work. But we think that if you're going to spend all that money, it'd be better to put it somewhere that everybody else can use it in the future. So, because this would only be just for our property. So, yeah, that was our intent. But you got to get it annexed first before you do anything.
Right.
So, but that's definitely our intent.
Okay.
And there's plenty of capacity in the 48-inch trunk line down here. Now, there is a 12-inch line that goes along, or 10-inch line that goes, 12. Goes 10 to 12 inches along Redland. That was there to service that mobile home park, the 600-acre mobile home park to the south. It's that total capacity. It's just, there's nothing left. So we can't use it. So somebody didn't plan ahead when they built it.
Well, I know that Tri-Cities has cited Oregon City as one of their biggest offenders for I&I, and I'm not sure where they are in working on that, but maybe.
Well, apparently this
Maybe
trunk
that's
line
one better.
right here has a pretty good, you got a lot of that up in the area, up here. That's why you need to upgrade the sewer lines in Holcomb. But this area, we're bypassing all of that, going down to that big 48-inch trunk
Right.
line. And that's where they recommend that we go.
Right.
But it'd be very expensive to do it, but I think it's worth it for 150
But it serves pretty much the whole North Village
Yeah,
by allowing that trunk line.
right. Yeah, that will service this entire area. So, does that answer your question?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. Will you be submitting the poster boards to staff for the record,
We'll give you whatever you want.
if you'd like? It's your option.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask Mr. Walter a question?
Please.
Hey, Pete. The properties that the applicant was referring to, those, to my best of my recollection, are all outside of the city limits at this time, where they were talking about?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. They were developed in the county when rural residential, et cetera, et cetera.
But they are in the USB. They're in the urban
The urban
service
growth boundary,
correct?
yes.
Okay.
Next, we'll have public comment.
Thanks, Pete.
I'll have two comment forms. First, we'll ask Rich Conley to come and give your comment.
Chair Stein and members of the commission, thank you very much. And I also very much appreciate you inverting the agenda items to have this addressed first, because I think obviously, as you're probably all aware, this is a fairly controversial issue and a proposal. With that, I'll be extremely brief. I'm not really going to touch on the merits of the proposed annexation in terms of infrastructure or traffic impacts. My comments, I think, are just going to be centered primarily on more the procedural aspects of this annexation proposal. You've heard a lot of key facts tonight. The first one, and a fairly profound set of facts, is that the voters of Oregon City have essentially rejected the Park Place plan not once, but twice, fairly resoundingly, by fairly significant margins in 2 prior annexation votes. Well, now we're here again, essentially a third bite at the apple, and the tactic has changed a little bit. Now, instead of doing one large parcel, and I think I applaud Mr. Ziegler for being candid. I think he's made it fairly plain that this is really the first step of a larger annexation plan, more or less a toehold in the tip of the Park Place annexation plan, and it's really envisioned as kind of a first step to eventually try to get to the overall larger picture of the whole Park Place plan. And again, I'll have other folks here address the merits of that, along with environmental, traffic, and other infrastructure impacts. But I just think, and I would just ask that the Commission be particularly mindful of and apply some heightened scrutiny in this sort of situation where the voters have previously spoken essentially on this very same issue and have resoundingly rejected this plan. And since then, really nothing's changed. As your own advisor has told you, the most recent vote was fairly recently in 2009. And really not a lot has changed in terms of the physical complexion of this area, and certainly not, unfortunately, in terms of the economics of our area. So again, I would just urge the Commission to really stay to its very own goals. It's goal number 5 in terms of public transparency and public participation, and that if this does go forward in any way, shape, or form, that it be subject to close scrutiny by the voters of Oregon City, and that process be honored, and that if this does go forward, that nothing be done to impede the opportunity for the voters of Oregon City to once again weigh in on and participate in this planning process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me, are you here speaking in favor of this, or in opposition to this, or neutral?
Well, I am in opposition to it. I'm a property owner. I own property due east of this area, and I have had concerns regarding this plan along. So I personally, I'm opposed to it, but my main comments tonight were really focused on the, again, the process of this. I think the process needs to be upheld and honored.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't. When you said your name, you didn't say whether you were in Oregon City or not, so I just assumed you lived in Oregon City.
Right. And I'm at 16509 South Eden Wildwood in Oregon City, Oregon. So,
Thank
for the
you.
record, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker I have is Kirk Tolstrup.
Good evening, Planning Commission. I live just to the west of the opposite side from Rich, and I am served by the Oregon City Water Department, and as are the three other homes on Frank Avenue. We're served by an old, it's probably built in the 50s, I suppose, water pump station that boosts the pressure from Livesay Road up to our houses. If Kent was able to develop this, we could get a water line to the back part of our property, so we wouldn't have the inconvenience of water outages whenever the power goes out or when there's a mechanical failure with the pump station. So, and Kent already talked about that a little bit, but the water department has wanted to delete that pump station for probably since we bought the property in '89. And it's not a big deal. It's just an inconvenience, especially if the pump goes out on a Friday afternoon and they cannot get a pump until Monday. So, without water, the water department has been very good in the past. They'll bring us water, drinking water. So, but I imagine it's rather expensive per household to maintain that station because it's only 3 houses. So, and also it would be, we do live at the end of the road, and as has been said before, when it floods, we can't get out, so we have to walk out through the back, through the blackberries and all that. So it would be really nice if the concept plan could start and we could get some connectivity, transportation, water systems. As has been said before, there are failing septic systems, especially down on the lower part of Livesay Road where people do not have backyards. They have to put their septic systems under their houses, basically, on some of them, or have special engineered septic systems. And the way we got to be, consumers of Oregon City Water is that this part was not annexed when the other part was in Park Place, and so Park Place Water District did include us, so the city took over our water department. So that's about all I have to say, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Christine Kaczynski.
Because he has, see, you don't have a town council report.
No.
Good evening. Christine Kaczynski, unincorporated Clackamas County. I'm concerned about building safe and livable communities. I'm looking at the long-range picture where a major road will come through Trailview and disrupt the lives of all these people. One of the core values for the concept plan is transportation and traffic. Can we ensure that children and families in the Trailview subdivision can safely access their area schools? How about safety for accessing their neighbors in their neighborhood, just walking across the street? How about the children now that cannot cross the streets? They can't ride their bikes or their skateboards because of cross traffic coming through. We're building small lots. There is no community park in this area. Where are the children and families going to play? They access Holcomb School, but with cross traffic, it will not be safe. I feel notification to citizens that are more than 300 feet away from this proposal should have been notified. I feel that all citizens being affected by cross-through traffic should be notified of these new subdivisions. Funding and finance. Construction costs for transportation improvements needed to serve this area amounts to approximately $137 to $187 million in 2007. Approximately $52 million of roadway and intersection improvements are likely needed as a result of this entire concept plan. Oregon City will have to fund $40 million of this. About $3 million will be funded citywide, with the Park Place being responsible for about $37 million. There is a need to identify funding mechanisms, revenue, bonds, loans, general obligation bonds. They're almost non-existent in today's economy. Cash reserves. The city doesn't have a lot of cash reserves. LID districts. Citizens really have no monetary capacity at this point to subsidize LID district. Advanced planning. Again, it's almost non-existent in today's market. One of the biggest reasons why the voters turned down previous annexation attempts was due to lack of money for required infrastructure and the fact that development was simply not paying its way. It appears that nothing has changed. The city continues to propose development without regard to money for necessary transportation, traffic, parks, fire, police, city services. Asking your citizens to bear these costs in added taxes is simply unacceptable. At this time in this economy, the city, the county, nor the taxpayers have any money to support this proposed future development. Although this ballot measure only proposes to annex at this time, be assured that your voters will consider all future costs and added taxes for development before they consider their final vote to annex or not to annex these lands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have 5 minutes for the applicant's rebuttal.
I have Ryan O'Brien again for the record. I just have a couple comments, and then Ken has some other comments, too. But I just wanted to mention that the voter annexation that occurred before, there was 2 previous ones. It was exactly the same, 40% in favor, 60% opposed. I think it's pretty much
right.
Both of them almost exactly the same. So it only takes 10% of the voters for this annexation to occur. And I think with a lot of the negative press that was in the newspaper and people scared there's going to be all kinds of extra costs, that's probably what turned people against the annexation. So this particular development is so small, there really is not going to be any significant cost to the city whatsoever. All the improvements will be paid for by the developer. There's going to be a huge amount of money of fees that will be paid to the city. Plus, you're looking at 30 homes with $350,000, $400,000 homes. Huge interjection into the economy for the local area, for employment, all the services they're going to provide in the area. And there's been some studies recently by the Home Builders Association that shows that development more than pays for itself in the long term with all the systems development fees and the permits and the long-term tax revenue. The cost to service this area is very insignificant in relationship to the amount of investment that would be made in this area from development of this property. So I think what people are talking about when you have a very large development, maybe there could be some infrastructure costs when you have to widen, add additional lanes to major highways and things like that, major expansions of sewer treatment plants, but that's already been pretty much done. So there's not a need for any of that type of infrastructure for 30 additional lots. So I think that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, and to kind of address Christine's comments, where's the funding going to come from to go ahead and take care of future plans? Right now, we have no real future plans. We're kind of dealing with the economic environment that we have today. The economic environment calls for us to incrementally approach this opportunity to go ahead and follow through with the approved concept plan that Metro, the city, and the county has already given their blessing to. This makes the most logical sense, again, because there's 3 roads already stubbed in. It's already been identified that this is where growth should occur. It's got obvious public safety issues that exist. But to respond to Christine's comment about where will the money come from, 5 years from now or whenever it might be down the road, the Park Place concept plan, and this is from the staff report on page 6 at the bottom, the Park Place concept plan preliminary addresses the forecasted traffic impacts and remedies and infrastructure costs that are necessary to accommodate the additional growth in the annexation territory. The improvements have been included in the city's transportation system plan as part of the adoption of the Park Place concept plan. And the infrastructure costs have been included in the most recent updates of the city's system development charges. The adoption of these charges and updates will meet the necessary level of service requirements of the city and will meet the intent of ODOT's transportation planning rule. So for someone to say, well, where's the funding going to come from? Well, your own staff has already told you where it's going to come from. It's already been addressed in the staff report. I don't know if she got a copy of the staff report or not, but that's where it explains it. Again, in this particular annexation request, we're not asking for any urban renewal money. We're not asking for any subsidies. We're trying to save the city potentially up to $500,000 in putting the water line in a permanent location. In addition to the SDCs, the property taxes that are generated that the city gets every year, you get that every year. And the advantage of having new homes as compared to older homes is in the state of Oregon, you have a cap of 3% annually that you can increase the property taxes. Well, if that property tax threshold was established at a fairly low level to begin with, you're limited to a low level. Whereas new homes are coming on the tax rolls for the city tax base at a much higher threshold that you then can elevate at 3% annually. And that's why cities need growth, to be honest with you, in order to go ahead and have that property tax revenue to collect on every year. If cities can't plan future growth, how can you plan your future budgets? How would you know what you're going to have? So to me, again, save the citizens money, but generate property taxes. It's a double benefit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, I have some questions for him.
Excuse me, Mr. O'Brien, Mr. Ziegler, the commissioners do have some questions. Commissioner Maybe.
First, the proposed police funding, where did that come from?
Well, it's been around for a while now, and as I understand it, you either agree to it, the $3,500 per dwelling goes to the police fund in addition to your SDCs for everything else, or you have an issue.
So I guess the question is for staff, is this an officially adopted ordinance that there's a price that people have to pay for police?
No, there's not.
So there's an unofficial bit of, dare you use the word extortion in place?
There's a requirement that the police services are adequate. And the applicant has asserted that they can make the police service adequate by paying for police services. So if there was another solution that the applicant identified, that would certainly be adequate.
So I guess the question is how did the city ever deal with police services before there was a fee for every new house that went up? Did we just absorb it and wait for property taxes to pay for them?
Correct. And this was a stopgap to cover that first year before the property tax came on the roll.
Yeah, okay.
And wasn't it the case, though, that we recently added police staff?
We added
Last year?
police staff?
Yeah.
Yes, we have.
We added police officers.
Correct.
But we still maintain the fee for police services for new developments.
Correct.
So what metrics does the police department keep to tell the public how they're doing in terms of spending the development money for the police services? I mean, it's a one-time fee and it's not a tax, so I'm wondering how that money gets spent and how it gets tracked, how it's kept track of.
That's a good question.
It is based on when a building permit is pulled for a property that's been annexed. I can't think of, since this has gone into place, if we had annexations where this has been applicable.
I don't think we've had any annexations in the last 5 years of more than
No, we
an
haven't
acre.
had an annexation.
Well, we're going to keep trying.
Well, I just...
We haven't had an annexation proposal since we've added police force, and so that's why I'm.
No, that's not true. We've had police coming online a little at a time, and we've had 1 acre approvals.
We've had some small parcels
Yeah.
out in the Central Point Pease Road. We're
Yeah.
one that was completely surrounded by a bunch of
Yep.
other properties.
Yep.
So
And that was voted down by the voters as well.
No, 1 acre one was
no, the
acre
little
one
tiny
was-
one was
okay.
approved.
Yeah, so little annexations tend to get approved. Big annexations tend to not get approved. Which is
But I agree
probably
with your concern,
something-
Commissioner, maybe.
Is this
So,
a big annexation?
do we have more questions for the applicant?
This is infill.
Well, actually, I just to put it on the record, in addition to SDCs, if you are building in the state of Oregon, do you not also have to pay a school excise tax?
I was going to mention that also.
Which would increase
Right.
housing in the Park Place area, which would potentially reopen Park Place Elementary, that Park Place was really upset about being closed, and then also generate more funds for the school district in general.
That's correct. Yeah, every new dwelling unit pays a construction excise tax directly to the school districts. And just the other comment about the park, I know the concept plan's behind all of you, so it's difficult for you to see, but
Oh, we've got it.
but there is a big park that's been identified to be incorporated as part of this master plan community. And I agree 100%. I feel it's been terrible that all these people that built new homes off of Holcomb Road and paid a park SDC for a new park, but has never gotten one. People on South End Road have all kinds of parks, but the people up here in Holcomb don't have any. Why the city has decided not to identify and acquire a park up there when they've received the funds? These people paid the city the money for a park, but they never got one. So I agree 100%. I want to offer a park in our concept plan. That's part of what the advisory board agreed to when we made this recommendation.
You could donate your piece for a park.
Well,
6.5 acre park. You could have connector
Great
roads.
spot for a park.
the word donation might be, I may want to interpret, I'd be willing to sell a part of our property.
I'm assuming you could talk to your tax professional and they could tell you whether that's...
Commissioner McGriff, do we have any more questions for the applicant? No?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
Chair Stein, before you go into deliberations.
Yes,
I just add a couple comments.
please.
In terms of what you've heard tonight, you've heard quite a bit of testimony. And the way our form of government and our charter is adopted, we have a planning commission that makes a recommendation to the city commission that then refers it, if it's approved, to a vote of the people. And we focus on the approval criteria that are adopted in the municipal code. So when you take this testimony in, please try and filter that through the approval criteria that you have to work within. I don't disagree that multiple annexation requests in Oregon City as of late have failed. That is not an approval criteria that you use to base a decision on. It's the way the charter is set up, that the ultimate decision, should the city commission find that it does meet those approval criteria, that the voters get to make that final decision on annexation or not.
In other words, as long as he's willing to keep paying the fees and going through the meetings, he gets to keep getting a vote.
The city has no role in if someone comes in and decides to request an annexation to the city. We review it based on the criteria that we have. We don't go out and actively look for properties to annex. We don't force annexation currently.
Except under certain
Right.
Currently,
safety
that's correct.
situations.
Health hazard and could be if it was an island.
And the health hazard is driven by state requirements. If you're within 300 feet, you have a failing septic system. If you're within 300 feet of a city sewer line, then we can do an emergency annexation. So there are exceptions. I'd also point out that in terms of local improvement district, I can't remember the last one that we've done. We did do the South End Sanitary Sewer Reimbursement District, which is where the private developers got together to put in a pump station on South End, and it created their own reimbursement district. One or two developers, I believe, came in initially, put in the full system, all homes that connected. We're still collecting that reimbursement district today. Pay that back. That's the last type of reimbursement district that I can remember being in place that we still collect on.
Who initiates that process?
That was initiated by the developer because of the lack of sanitary sewer infrastructure in South End Road.
And do the people in the proposed district have an opportunity to vote on that?
No, they do not.
No.
The private developer fronts the money to put in the infrastructure and then is paid back as the housing unit comes on.
Do you guys have a sunset on that? Usually there's a certain span of time when
There is a
people can
sunset
sit
on
that out
It
and
is, I don't remember what it is.
I'm not
it's
15.
15.
Yeah, because we've been
Because I know
collecting
that-
on that one for quite a while.
the municipality that I work for has just changed theirs to 20 because people have been known to sit that
Just wait it out.
Sit it out, yeah.
time out and connect for much less.
Mr. Ziegler did hit on, when we adopted the Park Place concept plan, we went through open houses, we created a citizen advisory committee creating that plan. And I guess I'm just trying to provide some back information. While all the testimony was very important to hear, it's up to you to try and filter through that to see how it applies to the approval criteria, because I didn't hear a whole lot of the approval criteria addressed in any of the testimony that you heard tonight. There are certainly tangents. There's discussions about where future roads are going to go, about extending sanitary sewer through the county down to Livesey, through Livesey. We're focusing on 6.5 acres right in this application. As we described earlier, a zone change, subdivision, those will all need to come through if this property is annexed into the city. When the Park Place concept plan was adopted, the system development charges for infrastructure were updated to account for those infrastructure costs associated with that. In terms of the existing one-way access in and out, that access to Holcomb Road, More stubs weren't put on Holcomb Road because of the site distance issues on some of the curves and coming around the corner up there. It was a site distance issue. But there are emergency and pet access, multiple emergency pet accesses to access that area. So while it is a one-way in, one-way out for general traffic, there is provisions for fire apparatus to be able to access that site and move through that subdivision. This is what you tend to see when we can't annex larger parcels in order to put in a complete system, is you get the piecemeal development. So it's difficult because either you do the piecemeal and you have all these transportation improvements or connections that can't be made because you have multiple lots that need to be annexed in order to complete the transportation or infrastructure system. Or, obviously, we've seen how difficult it is to bring in a large parcel that could have been brought in at once and put in all the infrastructure that's been identified and needed to upgrade some of those facilities. In terms of Livesey Road and the water line out there, we took that over. That road was approved under the county jurisdiction decades ago.
Yes.
And this is one of the difficulties that we have when we start to expand into these areas that have been parcelized through previous county partitions or subdivisions that occurred. They're not to city standards. We all know that. And the only way they will get to city standards and get the amenities such as city water, city sewer, sidewalks, curbs, planter strips, is to bring that to an urban standard. So those come with the eventual development of that area should that occur. In terms of noticing, we would love to send notice to everybody. We are limited. We follow what the municipal code and state law requires. The property was noticed. Property owners within 300 feet. The neighborhood association was noticed. The citizen involvement committee was noticed. It was posted on our website. It was advertised in the paper. There'll be an additional hearing at the city commission. We've provided the noticing, and I must say we've had several discussions with the planning commission and the city commission, and we've adopted updates to our administrative procedures to ensure that we try and expand the noticing that is out there. And we believe we've met everything that is required for that noticing. So once again, I guess I'd circle back to focusing on the approval criteria when you're making your recommendation, and we'd be happy to try and answer any concerns or questions that you do have about that or anything that you have heard in terms of testimony tonight and help you with your decision.
Thank you, Tony. Commissioner Kidwell.
I had a couple of questions for Tony, if that's okay.
Please.
The result of a favorable approval by this commission is not the final word. That sends the application to the city council.
Correct.
And then should the city council approve it, then it goes to the voters.
Correct. The planning commission makes a recommendation to either approve or deny to the city commission. City commission can then either deny or recommend that it gets sent to the voters for their consideration.
And is there a mechanism for appeal of either our decision or the city council's decision?
Yes, an annexation decision can be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals after the City Commission makes a decision.
The city commission will be the final decision maker in this matter.
Okay.
Other questions for Tony at this point? Commissioner Kidwell, would you like to begin our discussion?
Based on the criteria for approval, it appears to me that this proposal meets the criteria approval. Weighing the arguments that I've heard, it appears to me that the benefits outweigh the concerns that have been expressed, and I would be prepared to support the proposal.
Thank you. Commissioner Espy?
I've always been really interested in the amount of revenue that a certain parcel of land that will be annexed into the city, how much that will actually generate, not only through the system development charges, but also through the revenue stream generated by property taxes throughout the entire life of the property versus the amount of maintenance and attention that the city has to pay to those subdivisions when they go in, street cleaning, sewer, storm, all those kinds of things. And I've never seen any numbers, but sometimes I think that there's a diminishing return when there isn't any additional, when there's just single-family housing and no commercial development or other kinds of larger revenue-generating uses to kind of balance that all out. I think the master plan helps and is a start for trying to get there, to do those things. And I have to admit that in the last couple of annexations, I voted against them because of those reasons. I've been in Oregon City for quite some time, and I'm still waiting for some roads to be improved adequately enough to, serve certain areas that have been subdivided in an adequate way. This property, I don't really think rises to that, though. I think this property can be annexed because the infrastructure is there. There are stub outs. There was planning. There is sewer. There's everything is there, and it's really considered more of an infill piece than an actual large scale annexation. And I think that this definitely meets the criteria for that and should be approved.
Commissioner Henkin?
I'm sorry. I
I'm
forgot
sorry,
one thought as well.
Yes, Mr. Conklin.
In terms of the discussion about the one tax lot that's separated in the process, it really is it's more of a process. We've worked with the county before in situations like this where we've had a piece that's been both inside the city or even half in the city and half in the UGB outside of the urban growth boundary. It is more of a subdivision process coordinating with the county surveyor on how to process it. We've done them several times. It is something that can be done. So I just wanted to add that in because there was quite a bit of discussion about
And I'm not sure
what do we do with this piece.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that's something that we consider as a part of the annexation review anyway, is it? I think that's more of the development side of things.
Correct.
Yeah.
It really seems like this neighborhood is ready for this annexation, especially with the stub outs as well as the sewage needs that'll pretty much be taken care of. I had the concern about the stress would be on the police force, but it's going to be taken care of at least as best as they can, as well as whether or not they're going to be going for a R3.5 zoning, which it really doesn't sound the direction that the applicant's going to be going for. I'm in support of it.
Commissioner Mabey.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of in agreement with most everybody. It's surrounded, or it has two of its four sides already have development. The connectivity of the new roads would increase service for both police and fire and their mobility. This is almost a geographic separation from the other properties because of the slopes that occur after, at the edge of this property. It's a relatively small parcel. I was really, my concerns about the two pieces were mostly just to get on record what it was, because, there's a legal definition, so many rods and chains from this point and that, and, that is what it is. And so he couldn't flip it to the other tax lot 180 and still meet the definition of his thing. The thing that bothers me the most about this is the police funding. I understand that it's a voluntary contribution, but barring a city ordinance or an approved PDC, Police Development Fund, whatever, I'm not comfortable with it. I wasn't when I was on city council, and so I don't know whether that's part of our purview to say approved, but don't concur with the contribution. I don't know, if that's, but I'd really, everybody talks about they have to pay their own way and they got to do with it. But you know what? When my house was built, I didn't have to pay a police fee. When anybody else who lives inside the city built their house, they didn't have to pay a police fee. Why? and I'm talking, well, it's different economic times. Houses were built in the 30s during the Depression, and they didn't pay a police fee. They didn't pay a fire fee. So, if you're talking about a level playing field, then they should be treated like everybody else, which means they don't pay up front. They pay through the property taxes. They pay through, the process that everybody else in the city pays through. So from that aspect, I would approve this, but I'm not comfortable with the police development fee. So I don't know whether we can recommend that or if I'm just going to get overridden. But anyway.
Well, item number 10 in the proposed findings, reason for decision and recommendation says that the City Commission recognizes that the applicant has offered a financial solution to the police funding shortcomings for future new homes and business. So are you suggesting that that language be stricken or modified?
Or that the recommendation be forwarded to not including 10 so that the commission can reattach it if they want, but not a...
Is there any consensus for that sentiment on the commission? I don't see that we have a unanimous position on that at this point.
Fine.
So I appreciate
I'm
your
on the
comment.
record.
Thank you.
Your turn.
I would like to just say I appreciate the one gentleman that left, and Christine, thank you for coming forward and testifying. I had hoped to hear from the rest of you sitting over there to my left, but you didn't.
To your left.
Well, that's true, to my left. So I do appreciate that you came, and for me it's very important to hear the public testimony. I understand very well what Mr. Conkle said about criteria, but I understand what your issues are, and I do want you to know I appreciate that you came in and came up and told us what you felt and how you thought. I do want to recognize the fact that I agree with Christine's comment that the notice for annexation, 300 feet, is really not adequate, and I appreciate, Tony, your comment that you want to try to do more, and I think it should be in those particular circumstances with regard to annexations, because I think they have more far-reaching impacts than just 300 feet. And people, regardless of their good intentions, may not see the notice in the paper. The notice of land use action signs are really too small for anybody to see if you're driving by, and that area you can't really pull over and read it. So I think anything that we can do as a jurisdiction to increase public participation with regard to annexations would be welcomed and would be much appreciated. But I know we're doing our best, but I appreciate the fact that that was mentioned, because I'm sure there are people that have no idea. I think, Paul Espy, you made a very good point about the particular issue that you share and that I share with you, in the fact that I've never seen any documentation as well either, and I think my professional experience has told me that really most development that is not single family or residential probably does not pay its way, the business, industry, and that sort of thing. And that's really all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I agree with the sentiment of the commission so far about this area being appropriate for annexation. And I did want to kind of point out that the Park Place neighborhood area of the city was annexed, but not by the people's choice. It was annexed because the state and the State Department of Environmental Quality and Metro saw the deficiencies in the sewer systems and saw the deficiencies in services to that area, and asked the city, didn't ask the city, required the city to annex that.
They told the city. That happened on my watch. No, I'm not responsible.
And so my point is that Metro has looked at this area since the 80s as a target for urban growth expansion, and the area has been planned out through the concept planning process. And we have an opportunity to give the people another chance to vote. And I think that's the best way to encourage public participation in this process. So what we're doing here is we're recommending to the City Commission to allow this annexation proposal to go to the voters. And so I support that, this proposal for those reasons.
Mr. Stein, I just have one little, since I know you weren't here at that time, but at the time, basically, Metro got into the process rather late. It was all pretty much health. The area was designated by the state as a health hazard. And under the regulations in the state statutes, ORS, health hazards annexations are not subject to debate. There was enough properties in the area where there were evidence of failing septic systems. There was also possible cross-contamination of the water system because of the failing septic system. So they basically said, hey, Oregon City, guess what? You're going to annex this.
Well,
so now come, let's go through the process. And we went through a process. There were lots and lots and lots of meetings. There were some people who, came in and said, hey, my septic system's fine. Why do I have to be in? But so be it. That's what it was. And I spent a lot of nights up in Park Place having meetings with folks about that. And, it was a necessity. It was not an option. I mean, it was either, you either annex them or that's the way it is. And the city willingly took it on after there was a review by our finance director and what the implications are, because we had to submit that with the paperwork. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of paperwork. It was a pretty interesting process.
Commissioner Mabee?
Well, I was under the understanding that the other option Park Place had was to incorporate and become their own taxing district
Yes, and they
be
did
their
not.
own city.
They did not
So-
want to do that. In hindsight, maybe they would have done it now, but
So at this point, I'm looking for a motion from the commission.
I motion to approve based on staff's recommendations.
I second.
We have a motion and a second.
Excuse me. Commissioner Kidwell?
Aye.
Commissioner Espy?
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff?
abstain.
Commissioner Mabee?
Reluctantly, aye.
Commissioner Henkin? Chair Stein?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Yay.
Good luck on your next step in the process.
It's a journey. It is a journey. Thank you.
Next, we have Planning Commission hearing SP. I'm sorry, excuse me. Next is Planning Commission hearing SP 1105, 801 Main Street, Courthouse Edition. Does any commissioner have any ex-parte contacts, conflict of interest, bias?
Wait.
Yeah, we got people
Yes.
swapping.
Or are we?
Yeah.
Are we
You
gonna-
just started a little too soon.
Oh, thank
You
you.
needed to wait for the other, got to wait for everybody. Thank you, Pete, for that excellent staff report.
Oh, thank you.
Got to wait for the people to come in there.
Give me one moment.
I didn't think we had anybody.
No,
Again.
They were out there waiting.
They were hanging out in the lobby.
They were hanging out.
In the comfortable chair.
Yes, not the semi-uncomfortable.
Thanks for your patience.
Not yet.
Head back down to Peanut Gallery. I will be.
You don't want to be in the hot seat yet, Paul.
I understand. You've been waiting. And thank you very much for letting the citizens go first.
So now we will open the record for SP 1105, the 801 Main Street Courthouse Edition. Does any commissioner have an ex-parte contact, conflict of interest, bias, or other statement to declare?
I have never had any business with the county court system.
So you say.
Have the commissioners visited the courthouse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many occasions.
In a peripheral
Many
way.
occasions,
By the
yes.
courthouse.
I'm one of those jurors that's been called but never
You have to
chosen.
start from the beginning.
Because they were not.
Because they weren't
They were
here.
not
Thank you
here.
very much. Okay, I
I'm
will
sorry.
read
I
the...
should have been more clear.
I'm sorry.
I
I will
thought you
read
had
the
to do
quasi-judicial land use hearing script.
You could make somebody else read it, like Charles or somebody.
Okay, SP 1105 is on our schedule tonight. The staff report has been prepared for the application. It's been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. Staff report identifies approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart to my right. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which the card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city will notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply, in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentation, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they're not given to city staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now we'll open the record for SP 1105, 801 Main Street, Courthouse Edition. And I think that our previous conversation about ex parte contact is sufficient for the purpose of this meeting. So, we're ready for the staff report, Christine.
Well, thank you, Chair Shine, Planning Commissioners. I have 3 items to enter in the record this evening. One is tonight's PowerPoint as Exhibit 1. 2 is a email and memo from Nancy Krushauer. She provided findings for the geologic hazard codes. Unfortunately, just wasn't ready to be put in the staff report last week, and so this would normally be entered into the geologic hazard section for finding. The way our geologic hazard section works is the city engineer has the ability to waive requirements based on the project. And looking at this application, she did not see that any further geologic review would be required on her level through the geologic hazards overview. Now, if for some reason the building department through the building permit process wanted to look at anything, that's always available. The site is located on the addition is located on the flat portion of the site, but on the 99E elevation is where the viaduct hits the cliff. And so if you look through, that's where you can get down under the stairs to get to the dock. And so a portion of the property is in our steep slope overlay, therefore we have to look at the standards. So this is a memo from Nancy Krushauer addressing the geologic hazard standards. And 3 are some new 3D elevations provided by the applicant, which I've included in the PowerPoint, but that will be entered in the record as Exhibit 3. The reason I'm here this evening, the applicant is here, is because of a newly adopted part of our development code. And we adopted this in 2009 as part of our code update. And what it does is it allows for modifications that better meet the standard or alternative designs to be reviewed, not through a variance process, which we were kind of channeled into prior, but through this process, which kind of looks holistically at the project and says, does this project meet or exceed the intent of the code, the design code that's written? Some of the planning commissioners who were on may recall that you reviewed the Abernathy Chapel this last year under the same standard. That was kind of a New England Revival chapel that the Abernathy Center was building, and they could not meet the 60% transparency because of the inherent design, and therefore requested that standard, and that was approved by the Planning Commission. The applicant in this situation is also coming under a modification that better meets the standard under the transparency section. I'll walk that through. Because the request for the modification, what was being proposed and what was required by the code for transparency was so different on a staff level, I did not feel that warranted a type 2 staff review, and the applicant has requested this to be sent up to a type 3 level, and staff supported that process. I'll briefly just read you the code so you can kind of understand the thought process through this. The review body may consider modifications of site-related development standards. These modifications are done as part of a design review and are not required to go through the variance process. Adjustments to use-related development standards, such as floor area ratios, intensity use, size, and number of units, are required to go through the variance process. The modifications that are denied through the design review may be requested as a variance through the variance process. The review body may approve requested modification if it finds that the applicant has shown that the following approval criteria are met. A, the modification will result in a development that better meets design standards, and B, the modification meets the intent of the standard. On balance, and this is very important, on balance, so we're looking holistically, the proposal will be consistent with the purpose of the standard for which a modification is requested. So you have three options this evening as a planning commission. One, you can determine that the applicant has met all of the applicable approval criteria and has shown the request for modification can be met and no additional conditions are needed. Then you should recommend approval based on the submitted conditions of approval. Two, you could determine that the application cannot meet all of the applicable approval criteria and believe that a request for modification cannot be met, and you should provide direction to the applicant on conditions that you believe will allow it to meet the modification standard. Or three, that you believe that the application has not met the modification standards, and you either deny the application or request that the applicant, or you remand the application back to a type 2 review where the applicant works with staff to provide a design that can meet the type 2 design standards. This is the site. It's the Clackamas County Courthouse, located between Main and McLaughlin or Highway 99E and 8th Street and 9th Street. This is a nice landscape plan which clearly shows the addition. Just briefly, the reason for the Sally Port, it's a 3-story, 5,250 square foot addition of the existing courthouse, and what it's proposed to do is to allow for intake of prisoners, the holding of the prisoners in the cell, and taking them to a secured courtroom, all within that 3-story addition. So I'll show some existing views from Liberty Plaza today, looking at this elevation. This is looking from 9th Street. McMinimans would be just at your right.
Before you go further, the window-like recesses that are there, are those bricked up windows?
Those are existing bricked up windows.
Okay, so there used to be windows and
Correct.
then they've been bricked up, so they create this three-dimensional.
Correct.
Okay.
Is there an elevation, front elevation?
I do have one.
Okay. I mean, like a real picture, not the
Yes.
not the drawing picture.
I can get that. This is one of those new 3D elevations that the applicant submitted today, and I thought it was a good use of showing both elevations. So we are under the pergola in Liberty Plaza, and it's showing the elevator shaft that they've utilized to kind of create a clock tower effect. And they're trying to mitigate some of the impacts of not having as many windows on this elevation with the addition of the pergola attached to the wall and then a freestanding pergola. This is showing the elevation from the parking lot. You'll see that they actually have utilized what exists already, but instead of the existing windows that were filled in, they're kind of alluding to filled-in windows on the second story. And this is where the holding cells are, and I'll show you later in the layout. You can see how that works.
Well, I get this shows on the third floor currently bricked up windows being windows. Are they?
This is the proposed third floor.
Well, no, I'm referring to the 99E section of the building.
This side?
This is the 9th Street section of
Yeah,
the building?
I'm sorry, I'm looking
Oh,
at
it's okay. So the addition would be about right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually looking at their proposed drawing from that picture.
Okay.
There.
That one.
Yep, and so these are the new windows
Right,
of the
I'm
third floor
looking
courthouse.
third floor further back. Keep going. There. Those two sets of windows there and the ones right next to them are currently bricked up.
Go back.
See?
You are correct.
So
I
they're
don't
gonna
think
be-
those are proposed to change.
Okay.
I think that was
Good idea, though.
Okay. This is showing the Main Street elevation, so we have the main courthouse here. This is showing the elevator shaft. What we have here is a louver that's going basically as a louver for air access between the main building and the elevator shaft.
Christina? Something's wrong with this front elevation. Something's missing off of this. That's why I said you have the real picture of the courthouse, because the front looks wrong to me.
I'll find the elevation, a true picture. Let me show the first floor plan. You can. The idea for this is you bring in the intake the prisoners into the sally port, close the door, do a secured transfer up the stairs or the elevator.
And just real quick for reference, the top of the picture is the McMinimans parking lot.
Correct.
Okay.
And then McMinimans would be over
Yeah.
here. Correct. And Main Street would be right along here, in Liberty Plaza here. Okay, taking them up to the, to the second floor with the holding cells, and then up to the third floor with a secured courtroom space. And in this situation, the third floor does have windows. The second floor do not show any windows, but in the 3D rendering, you did see the illusion of the windows. They played off that, as well as they played off some illusion of windows along this section of the Main Street Liberty Plaza elevation. So real briefly, the standard that's not being met is our facade standard. This is for 1762-055, which is for all commercial and institutional buildings. So it's kind of a big category. Facades on corner lots shall provide at least 60% windows or transparency on all corner facades, and at least 60% transparency on the main facade. So for the Clackamas County Courthouse, that actually makes the 99E McLaughlin Boulevard elevation a corner side elevation, and the 9th Street elevation would be a corner, and that would be 30%. And then this elevation is just measured on the first floor. That's the way our standards work. We just are looking at the first floor of a building on a Type 2 design review. So I provide just an easy graph just to show you what's proposed and where they are in their application. A Main Street 60% transparency is really based on to the street commercial storefront bay application. In this situation, the applicant has proposed one window on that elevation, so that brought them to an 8% transparency. The corner side, which was the 990, has no windows, and therefore it's a 0%. And the 9th Street side does not have any windows as well, and that's at 0%.
Now, currently, the building in and of itself, it's 000.
No, well, currently, if you're looking at traditionally, the building has about 30%. If you looked at historic proportion of the rhythm of the building, is about a 30% transparency. In some situations, right here, they actually do have existing windows that they will be boarding up. So these will be removed.
And the ones on the ground floor. Or they'll be adding windows on the third floor.
And they'll remove the chimney?
Correct. No.
It'll be
chimney stairs.
encapsulated
Right.
Yeah.
into the rest of the design.
Oh, right, because it's right here. Excuse
Oh,
me.
right, okay.
Let me go. This is the proposed materials. The applicant has brought their materials board. They're trying to choose brick to closely match, and I'll let the applicant talk a little bit more about their design material choice. This courthouse is not locally designated as a historically designated property, but it is eligible. And what that means is when you are eligible for listing for the National Register, and federal money is being used, you need to go and get Section 106 approval through the State Historic Preservation Office. That is the part of their requirement as a State Historic Preservation Office is to review these. The county did gain approval in December of 2010 for the addition, and it was found that the addition did not adversely affect the historic significance of the courthouse to the point that it would lose its potential National Register status. So that's what a Section 106 looks at. It doesn't look at, do we like the addition, or do we think Oregon City is okay with it? They're just looking at, does the addition adversely affect the historic significance of the courthouse? And so that Section 106 approval was granted. Doesn't really have any bearing for a Type 2 review, but I did want to bring that in as part of this larger discussion because I think it does create a little merit in kind of the thought process of how the applicant went about designing this addition.
I would think it would qualify more for criteria B as to what happened there as opposed to
true, but they
its
also
architectural significance.
But they also still send it because if you're looking at the Secretary of Interior standards on addition, what you want to do when you do an addition appropriately, you're on this balance of not faking history. And being compatible. And so every development has to find its little niche. You want to tie in architecturally, but stay submissive to the main building. So you try to find that line which makes the addition fall to the background, but at the same time, it's tied in enough that it respects and has the rhythms with the main building. And I think they have done that. I think they looked at this and they made a thoughtful approach at looking at the Secretary of Interior standards. What they didn't meet was our design standards for commercial buildings. So what you're looking at tonight is, if you start to look at any potential mitigation or additional conditions, I'll definitely have the applicant walk through their thought process of how they got there today. Some of it was obviously security concerns. You can imagine why they're doing this, and some of the inherent concerns of putting false windows in a building. But some of it was thinking out, how do you make this addition become subservient to the courthouse? And putting in a giant window bay of false commercial storefront windows may have checked off our list of a Type 2 staff review, but it may have created too much of an element if you wanted to just approve it as is. So there was some thought process brought in on why, even if for security reasons or practical reasons, why you may not want a commercial storefront right on that elevation to try to diminish its importance to the courthouse, because you would have had dramatically different transparency rhythms than the courthouse would. There are two main groups that came in support of this application. The CIC did vote to support the application at their meeting, and I just pasted from the applicant's submittal from the minutes of the CIC meeting. Lloyd Purdy did not provide a formal letter of support, but I did have a conversation with him over phone today, and he wanted to reiterate these two important issues: that Main Street businesses support the application as a way to retain the courthouse downtown, and the courthouse traffic has provided a lifeline to downtown during the economic downturn and provides a healthy portion of lunchtime restaurant use. And so downtown businesses want to see the courthouse remain downtown. That's pretty much the level of their interest in this addition. So I have some thoughts from staff. It's about the only way I could think about putting this, because this is such a different application and there are kind of all these disjointed issues relating. So I just thought the best way is to kind of go through them, and I think that may help you in some of your decision making this evening. One, the proposed plan is not designed to be a commercial space, rather it is designed for secure intake and transfer of inmates. The applicant believes that the development meets the larger intent of the code, specifically as the building is set back behind the Liberty Plaza and will not directly interact with on-street pedestrians. Once again, SHPO determined that the simple addition is small and set back adequately and continues to differentiate it from the historic courthouse. No matter how many false 1/1 windows are added to the building on the ground floor, the county cannot add windows to the garage door for security reasons, and so full compliance with transparency standards, which would require a Type 2 review, is very doubtful. If the applicant has proposed a design with some false windows that mimic the fenestration rhythm of the courthouse on all floors, all 3 floors, which would have resulted in a transparency level of about 30 to 35%, staff probably would have processed as a Type 2 level, as it could easily be shown that the addition was designed to integrate into the architecture of the courthouse. The applicant did not want to pursue a design with that many false windows, which would have inherent maintenance issues, especially on the second floor behind holding cells. I mean, I'm not going to speak for the applicant, but I can't imagine maintenance would probably have to be done from the outside, maybe with some cherry pickers. I mean, there's a point where there might be some questions of how you can do false windows on the second floor. Pedestrians who enter Liberty Plaza will be interacting with yet another building with blank walls, some of the downsides of this proposal. And the current lack of activity and programming in the plaza only increases the perception that there is no interaction between the street and the new addition. I just brought a Google Street View of Liberty Plaza just to kind of show where we are today. You'll see the Buick building to the right is where the law library is, and it's a kind of a large blank wall. The plaza has attempted to soften it through plantings. You'll also have kind of if you look at the addition, it's going to be here. It's going to create another wall, which could, if with an active plaza, may have created kind of a framing, though one wonders, how much impact this addition will have behind an underutilized plaza, and what effect it really will have. And I guess on a staff level, I don't have an answer for you. I wish I could come up with a really easy condition of approval that addressed all the issues and mitigated everything, or said that the applicant has done all they can do, and I can't think of anything else that you could look at. So that's why we're here tonight. It's a Type 3 application, and you get to be a design review committee this evening. And I think that's the goal of this section, which is modification that better meets the standard, is you can look at this application on its own against the larger goals of our code and not be caught up kind of in this number here and this number there and what's the hardship here and what's the hardship here. And I think it's a lot more freeing to look at an application through these eyes. At least that's what I think. So I'm here, and for Commissioner Griff, I will find a photo elevation while the applicants are speaking. But I'm here to answer any questions, and I know the applicant is here to make a small presentation.
So are we considering the entire site plan in total, or are we focused specifically on this window issue?
You are. The site plan design review is pretty much a Type 2 review, so it's very clear and objective standards. When you approve this evening, you will be approving the whole application, and it'll be, whatever decision is done this evening will be for the whole application. It doesn't need to be remanded back for a final staff review.
But the reason that we're here with the Type 3 application is specifically because of this window
Correct.
issue. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Hi, Paul Boundy, LRS Architects. Thanks for letting us come in here and talk to you about this project tonight. I don't have a lot to add to Christina's presentation. I think she captured a lot of the factual information, and I think I'll just back up a little bit and kind of go back to sort of the basis of the project and why this project was undertaken, give you a little bit of description about how we got to where we got to, and have a little discussion, I imagine, here about the windows and the transparency issues. And really, this project is first and foremost is a security project. It's been around in many forms for many years as a way to increase the level of security in the downtown core, increase the security of the staff, increase the security of the inmates that are being transported from the jail to the courthouse facility. This is a function that's always taken place out in the open, and if anybody knows anything about this, it shouldn't be taking place outside in the open. So this project started out as an enclosure for that system and has expanded to accommodate a better environment within the facility to hold inmates in a secure fashion. if you've been up to the third floor and you've seen the existing holding cells, they have the old iron bars and the open toilet, and there's one large holding facility and one small one for any separation of classifications or sexes if they bring over male and female inmate. So what we've done is created on the second level of the expansion, created a modern holding facility that will allow both the separation of different classifications of inmates plus female, male inmates. It also has a very small intake facility where if somebody is taken into custody as a result of a court action, they can be processed to some degree before they are transported then to the jail. So really that's the crux of this project. And then the third floor is a courtroom that will accommodate the high security and high risk offenders, utilizing existing staff and the like, and I think that's pretty well detailed out in the presentation. The design of this was the challenge. How do you make this 3-story expansion add to this very elegant, very well proportioned facility? And really there's no way around the fact that the form here definitely follows the function. The stairway, the elevator are two elements that are very distinctive. They're very vertical, and they have a scale to them. The inmate or the vehicle transport door needs to be of a certain size to handle trucks, the Sprinter vans that come in and out of the facility. The second floor holding cell, we don't want any windows, or if we did put windows in there, they would look like jail windows, and for those of you who have seen the jail windows, that wouldn't add much to this facility, so we opted just to go with a fairly plain facade. The third floor, the courtroom, the security folks were completely against windows up in the third floor courtroom, but we did feel it was very important to use that opportunity to tie in to some degree to the rest of the courtroom. I would like to point out, though, one of the things that we have discovered as we've been going through this project is that a lot of those windows that are shown as bricked in weren't actually bricked in. They were actually built that way in the original, because those are the courtroom. The original courtrooms, the original holding cells are on that northeast face of the building. So that second floor is their large courtroom. It did not have windows when it opened. The holding cells are up on the third floor. They did not have windows when it opened. So those haven't been bricked back in. They've always been like that. So we've opted to take some of those cues. We did a lot of looking at the elevation, looking at more or less of one of the very pleasant things about the building is the very nice white cornice, the alabaster stone cornice. We looked at integrating that into a bigger sense into the third floor of the expansion, but he began to make that feel very sort of short and disproportionate. So what we opted to do was just take the brick up to the full height and not try to make this heavy cap over this building, just try to keep it as very simple as possible. I think Christina captured it nicely when she said it kind of sets back, it's subtle. We're picking up on some of the color of the alabaster. We're going to incorporate some precast concrete elements into this. So we're picking up on the materials, and to some degree where we can with the brick, we're going to pick up on some of the brick detailing to get it to incorporate in a way that it doesn't really start to violate, that you're not trying to make this thing look like it was built in the 20s or 30s. We felt that the elevator tower, the more we looked at it, was really one of the, we didn't tie the horizontals across that. We wanted that to feel a little taller. We brought the clock tower into that just to sort of tie a little bit into the plaza, the downtown. The Main Street folks really liked the clock tower. They very much enjoyed the fact that it was there. It gave another icon or potential icon for the downtown area. The plaza itself, this building is intended to be a backdrop. It's not intended to create or socially engineer something happening in that plaza. It's strictly there as a backdrop. I think when you look at the existing elevations of the plaza, what we're replacing is a 6-foot cedar fence with a lattice on top with this brick wall. I mean, it's not subtle. It's not going to disappear, but it is a solid backdrop there. What can I say about the transparency? I think Christina kind of captured that well, is the primary function of this building being security. There's really, we didn't feel it was appropriate to try to force something here that really doesn't belong. Even if we had windows there, they're back in the plaza. For the most part, they're behind landscaping. it just didn't feel like it would be something that would be able to work. And we looked at ways to do it, and really what it came down to is no matter how you're doing it, you're faking it. You know, it's always going to be false. So looking at the landscaping, looking at ways to break the scale down to that elevation, that's where and looking at the existing elements of that plaza with the pergolas sort of is where that direction came from. You know, there's actually there's opportunities there for other things. Some of the discussion with the Main Street group, you know, is there opportunity for murals there? Is there opportunities to project movies for movies after dark, which is one of the programs that I think the downtown group is trying to get started again or restart. And this is a great backdrop for that. And I think there's certainly room for the discussion there, and the county's interested in having that discussion. So I think that's pretty much it. Any discussions, questions? Certainly, I'm sure there will be a.
I'll let you start that way. I do have some.
Yeah, questions from the commissioners? Zach? Yeah.
I did have one question. I appreciate what you said about the security and not trying to fake it. It just did occur to me when Christina was making her presentation that there may have been an opportunity to use some spandrel glass in there to replicate some of those window openings. I wondered if you had given any thought to that.
We looked at it, and it's certainly a potential, but it is. You know, it would still be spandrel. It would be, in this specific case, behind landscaping, or it breaks that sort of that base. I mean, the building has this very nice feeling of a base around it, and the 8th Street. The facade across from the Verdict. How about that? Let's start that way.
That's 8th Street.
That's 8th Street. That's what I thought. Is all that alabaster because it's got windows at the lower level. Here, the windows, even if we put them in there, if we were trying to align with the first floor, would be up above that 4-foot level. So they would be up. If we were trying to tie it into the building, we really have to place them fairly high on the facade.
Right. I was just thinking about potentially replicating some of those punched openings in the existing.
No, that's definitely possible. That's definitely possible. It's just we felt again that if you were putting spandrel in there, there's not going to be anything behind it. There's no light coming out of it at night. There's no.
It's still fake.
It's still it's yes. That's one way to put it. And it's drawing attention to something that really didn't want to have any attention drawn to it. And the pattern, we felt that the windows. I mean, we do have windows in the lobby spaces up and down that facade that kind of break the vertical building from the horizontal, and we felt that just the nice. If we do something good with the brick pattern there, it'll be just a fairly subtle piece, and then the windows kind of give it a different, a break between the two masses there. So we did look at it. It wasn't one of my favorite solutions. So, sorry.
Mr. Chair, will the alabaster band have the same relief as the existing?
Not to the same degree. I think if you look at where we can, right now what we're showing here is just a sample of precast. We would be making that out of precast rather than actually trying to replicate the stone. We would try to replicate the texture and the color as best we can, but I think the patterning you see in some of the areas, I think that's what makes that courthouse special. And I think if we try to replicate that, we can replicate some of the shapes, but we can't replicate some of the designs and the patterning on there. Because we have played it down, we don't have the big cornice element, and that's where a lot of that is, and the entry is really where a lot of that takes place, and we're not trying to make a new entry to this building by any means.
Okay, and then will it have a parapet that is of adequate height to hide the HVAC systems and rooftop
Yes.
hardware? Okay.
And that actually is required by code. So if they came back at the building
Good.
permit process,
That's good.
they would have to.
Yeah, and I do apologize for those windows. You're right. The two on the part that's protruding are actually part of the recessed windows, but the 6 on the edge are actually the glass.
Couple things. First, thank you, Christina, for bringing this forward and not making this like you have to have transparency mandate. I remember when I was just getting out of the Navy, they were introducing women onto combatant ships. I was a top secret guy, and they wanted to put a window in my top secret safe because it was a workspace and I might do something. It's a safe. Anyway, so thank you for bringing a thoughtful process to this. My first question is, why isn't the, lack of a better term, the white band continuing through the clock tower? It really,
Well, we
looks
wanted-
like you forgot it.
Well, we wanted that to feel taller. We wanted to give that a different proportion.
But
And
if you can't even see the clock from the front, then it's not going to be taller. It's going to look weird to somebody walking around and then suddenly seeing that there's a clock tower that doesn't even project above the buildings.
not sure what you mean, but it doesn't project above the building.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, if you look
Right.
at, if you're standing in front of the courthouse, like in front of the red awning,
Right.
you can't see the clock.
No, that's true.
So if it's not actually going to be taller, and there's a visual cue that it's not taller, you probably should just draw the line and keep that. It's the same size as the rest of the building, and because it looks like you kind of forgot it. Like the whole tower is a complete afterthought to the rest of the building that's been constructed in the 1950s, and then we built this clock tower in front of it. Because to me, it looks like that's the addition rather than anything else.
Understand. I get that point.
Or you can pump the tower up higher so the clock's visible across the city, but what's a few $100,000 extra dollars to the, I'm a taxpayer. Okay, forget that. I appreciate, though, the whole clock tower thing. That's excellent.
Okay, good.
Okay, I'm going to not appreciate the clock tower thing. I understand
Yin and yang.
why we have this planned ahead of time. I understand why you want to put a focal point there, but I think what I'm looking at from the standpoint is that the front of the courthouse is the focal point. And if this is intended to recede and not draw attention to itself, the first thing you're going to do if you're standing there is you're going to go, oh, look at that clock tower. So, I mean, if you want a clock there, I would turn it and put it in the plaza rather than making it so visible, because it really does draw the eye away from what I consider to be the courthouse, which is the character-defining building of this particular situation. I don't, however, have a problem with you're not carrying the band around, but one of the things I was looking at is that I'm not sure how to describe it, but the little indentations where the planters are, I like the one that's on my left, because I like the way it aligns with the top of the window that's just adjacent to it.
The one that's supported, not the freestanding one.
The one that's supported. So then when I go up to the next level of windows, it seems to me that large indentation could have a little bit of a break in it so that it meets the same sort of form as the window. It's not trying to be a window, but it's kind of matching the articulation.
The ones that are above the plans.
Above the planter, it would match the articulation, yes, right in there, coming all the way across and also to the tower. So that you've got, I see the line of the windowsill, and it draws your eye across, and it seems like even with a little decorative brickwork to divide that space up, again, it would break it up and make it less obtrusive and kind of keep it, what you're trying to do is you're trying to make this as unremarkable as possible and an adjunct to the historic building.
Right.
And I think that by and large you have done that.
Okay.
I just think breaking that up a little bit would kind of keep it, I'm trying to think, what's the word I want, Christine? It would keep it
Consistent.
Well, it would keep it consistent, but it wouldn't keep drawing your eye up for that long rectangular shape. It would kind of break it up right there as you come along.
Okay.
And it just has to be done with brick. It's just, you don't have to put a windowsill there, but maybe just a little bit different pattern of brick right in there would do that.
Or just not have the indentation for a foot.
There you go. Paul, I do have to ask you a question about this garage door. And unfortunately, that is when I looked at this, that's the first thing my eye went to. It's
Yep.
just like,
Yep.
it is just so gigantic and foreign. And I believe you have see if I can read this with my bad eyes. It says that's precast concrete. So what's the door?
The door material would be a metal slat, a metal system.
It's a security door.
It's a security
Somebody
door.
can't
Yeah, you can't
drive
Maybe
and ram out of it.
explain that metal slat.
It's Like our parking garage, the apartment building. It's very similar to that. It's a horizontal slat because it'll roll up onto a.
Yeah, but that door is fairly, we park in the same place. by
Yeah,
the way,
that's
just so
right,
you-
that's right.
It's fairly transparent, though.
It is fairly transparent, but you can get less transparency to
transparency.
that. It would be more of a solid piece. And that was noted as well by the Main Street group, looked at it and said, ooh, is that door going to be white? And unfortunate sense of coloring there. No, that door probably will not be white. It'll be a beige color that kind of blocks it out a little bit. And yes, it is a large, it looks pretty large in this picture. It's probably only about 24 feet or something like that, I believe.
Well, I was
is the
wondering what the
size.
dimensions of it were as well.
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but it's wide enough for both spaces to be accommodated with a single door
Okay.
for
So
both parking spaces.
maybe this is more technical, but I think on the site plan, so is it anticipated that 2 vans are going to be driving in there at the same time and they're going to be unloading people, or is it going to be like 1 van at a time and you unload those incarcerated persons and they go where they're going to go and then another van would come and
They will take 2 vans full at one time.
at one time?
Yeah, they have upwards of 20 to 25
The morning-
inmates
the morning
or
and the afternoon
inmates that
rush.
come in and then leave at the end of the day. They basically bring them over in the morning. They take them back in the evening.
They get to hang out in the jail space.
And they get to hang out in the jail space. And
Because
they're
one of the things I wanted to suggest is that if that was not the case, if it only needed to be 1 van, then, it would really lessen the impact of that facade. It just bothers me because it's just, and I went over today, I was at Pioneer Courthouse Square, and I went over and I looked at the doors, the garage doors on the courthouse that the judges insisted be there. And the way they're tucked down under, so they are really not as visible as I had
Right.
thought them to be in my head. That's why I was over there this afternoon on my way someplace else, and I just stood there for a while looking at them, and I said, no, this is not quite the same thing. Is there some solution or some suggestion to, could it be made darker so that it just sort of blends in with the door?
It could be made darker to blend in with the brick
I
more.
think that would really help.
I think you're right
The
in that.
beige,
And-
I don't think, is just going to kind of stand out
Yeah,
there.
no, I agree. And we've looked at narrowing it
Oh,
down.
yes, true, there's dirt.
If it was beige, it'd just look dirty.
It just gets dirty after
That's
a
true.
while.
We have looked at narrowing it down. The problem the other challenge we have in that lot is it is a very tight
Maneuverability,
lot, and
yes.
maneuverability to get vans in and out of there is going to be a little bit of a challenge because we are pushing them over from where they park currently. We are pushing them over a little bit to accommodate the actual access.
Yeah, I've seen
So
them.
it's pretty tight there.
So I think if you can come up with a color that staff would approve that would, in essence, just sort of make that door, mitigate it, make that door sort of disappear, I think that would go a long way towards that. As you say, it's not truly representative of what it will look like, but I don't, when I go over there, I really don't want to see a beige garage door there.
Understood.
Because that would just be too weird.
Understood. And I think maybe even playing down the detailing around the door is a little, I think we could tone that down a little bit as well, so we're not having a big white wrap around this dark door.
Yeah.
That would be kind of the next step
'Cause I
of that,
think
is
that
making
you-
sure those work hand in
Yeah,
hand.
I think that making it look even similar to the alabaster is not something you really
Yeah.
want to call
No,
out. You
that's-
really want to make that, you really kind of want to make that door disappear as much visually, so if someone looks at it, they're going to kind of go, that's a door, but not like, that's a door.
I agree. Okay.
Which gets to the next step of, should the bottom half be whitish and the top half be reddish? So when it's closed,
I understand what you're saying. I don't think that's going to be an issue.
well, you got a brick.
They're going to be in there, and the door is going to be closed behind them because of security.
I understand
issues.
that, but if you have a problem with the visual representation of a white or steel or solid red door, it's going to look different because it's either going to be all red, so there's going to be a break in the granite base, or it's going to be all white and it's going to be a break in the brick base.
It'll be
So
what you're saying is it will call attention to the
one way or the other,
opener.
if it's a solid color, it will call attention to itself.
Well, I think Paul can figure that out. The I did like Charles's suggestion about maybe some windows. So I guess the thing, will the existing windows that are being removed, will they be reused on the addition?
Probably not.
And what's going to happen to those?
The old windows, they will probably go to Jeff, and Jeff will use them when he has to
What-
replace another window in this building.
What are those?
They're wood.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you reuse them?
Or you reuse them somewhere, but not in the courtroom up there. Yeah, we reuse them in the courthouse.
And so what-
But not in the courtroom, not in the expansion. When we're trying to make the expansion the secure facility, we
Well,
want
I
to
was-
make sure that,
I was just thinking about these windows. The ones you have in
The lobby window.
The lobby
Yeah.
windows? Not in the courthouse part.
to be honest with you, we haven't thought about that too much.
Well,
I mean,
just throw that in there.
No, I appreciate that. I think just what we know about the windows that are there currently and what we'd like to make sure is that the new windows are being built to a higher security level, so we're going to have detention level of glass in there. They have to be a metal frame system. We are working with a manufacturer that can match the look, so to speak. They're not going to be double-hung operable windows, but they will have the one-over-one panel with the depth to them, and the windows being up where they are, I think it'll be not something anybody could really tell.
Will it be a true divided light?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Actually, I have, yeah.
I mean, that's what it shows on here, so
Yeah.
I was feeling very good about the fact that they are at least going to have a true divided light, and we've had a number of applications I've seen from being a citizen part come in, and they're kind of fake looking, and you can really tell that they're
Like the ones
fake.
the ones right here.
Never mind. I already made my testimony about those windows.
Oh, sorry.
We're still working on it. The city actually has good intentions to try to replace some of those windows. So we're just moving along with that.
Yeah, but as replacement, as the existing frames
As maintenance
go away, as
replacement.
maintenance requires, they can reuse the frames that are in there, because they are all basically the same size and the same.
Well, there are lots of people, particularly local people, who can repair wood windows that we should, Christina has a list, and she's used many of these folks, and they need to be maintained and that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
So the clock, we're back to the clock.
I'm okay with the clock.
Yeah, I'd rather have it facing the street than a parking lot.
Yeah.
Well, that would help activate it some more. People would walk around there and look at it. Again, I'm as I said to Paul out in the lobby, was that, this is in my mind, it already is a designated landmark. I know we're not reviewing under that, but I think we need to take under consideration that this building, although the third courthouse here in Oregon City, is a significant building, and it's probably one of the nicest courthouses from its genre that is around and is still mainly intact from the exterior. And the county has done a good job in terms of maintaining it and keeping it up. And yes, I strongly feel that the courthouse should stay downtown. We are the county seat, and every county has a courthouse downtown. Although there's a couple of communities that the city has moved into some of their courthouses, and so it maintains that governmental presence downtown. I guess I'm just trying to reconcile myself that, you see a lot of courthouses, particularly the ones in Eastern Oregon, that are built with a clock tower in them, and they are integrated into the facility, and a lot of them have bells and things of that sort. And to me,
They're usually centered off of the
and they're
front doors.
yes, and they're centered, and that's what bothers me about putting the clock there. It's off center. It's not part of the original building. It's an addition, and I just would rather not call that much attention to the fact that it is an addition, and maybe there's another place that a clock can go downtown. I'm just not sure that this is really the best location. And again, I've taken many pictures of the courthouse. I particularly like it in this wintertime with the Christmas decorations, say Trails In, right up there at the top, and it's just a beautiful framed facade. And that's one of the reasons why I really like this building. And I too have been in it many times, but not for those reasons.
Denise, if I could just offer
Sure, Charles, I'd like your architectural
comment from my perspective. We have the existing courthouse to the left, and we have this new addition that is trying to be compatible with the existing courthouse, but not compete with it. And just my observation, the one element that I think they've done a great job with is the transition between those two pieces. And the combination of that ventilation grill with the clock tower, I think, creates a good transition element that it keeps the new addition from really competing with the existing building. And I think without that element in between, you would see that there's a difficulty between the cornice without that element. Getting a transition between the existing cornice and the new cornice, I think it would be problematic. And it would almost dictate that you would have to try to match the existing cornice. But by having that clock tower and the ventilation grill, it gives you a transitional element between those two pieces.
See, it's not a clock tower, it's an elevator shaft, and that's what it is. It is what it is.
We have another facade view showing the ventilation transition between that.
I don't,
The large
yeah.
one of the.
Probably the
You
straight
see it
on.
in that one.
That one, yeah.
That one right there.
But here we can't see the recessed.
I think that one of the things you're going to keep in mind is that from across Main Street, and then if you're looking at a head-on view of this, that expansion pretty much disappears.
It's going to be in shadow.
You
The
just
Louvre
visual shadow. You're not going to you can't see that piece unless you're coming from the north down Main Street.
You're standing at the steps of the courthouse.
Yeah, you don't
You're not
see
gonna
it.
around
You
that
don't
corner.
acknowledge it. Where you see it is when you're in the plaza, when you're in Liberty Plaza or in that
Plaza
area.
North.
Yeah, in that area around there, and that's the head-on renderings where you're looking at it straight on are always misleading because we are a good 40 feet behind. Was it 40 feet or 30 to 40 feet behind that facade?
Well, I guess my thing is I'm okay with the clock. I think, for one thing, it's when you're up on the bluff at McLaughlin House and by the elevator looking down at the city, I mean, it's right there. So it's visible from a touristy standpoint as well as a downtown north standpoint. I just really, and again, maybe the architect here can say, but I really think it needs that band because since it really isn't physically higher, I think, you just need to say it's part of the building because, at least from the pictures, my thought would be to try to walk around it and see if it's a freestanding structure because it would appear to me graphically that it's a freestanding structure in front of that part of the courthouse. So, but if it had the band, I'd say, it's part of the building, and off I'd go. But granted, it's a picture, and pictures can only do so much.
Well, it's a tough problem, I think. I agree with Commissioner McGriff, and I disagree with Commissioner McGriff, and I don't have much of a sensibility at all about design approaches to these kinds of things. And from what I'm seeing, is it looks like a tough problem.
What you're saying is it's coming around here, but then it's not.
At this point, I don't know. Are we talking about
I get that.
providing the architects a recommendation from this group to say that you need to do something better and come back to us, or are we saying that this better meets the intent of the code as
Or provide conditions this evening that you think may get to that.
So I want to try to pursue that angle at this point. Do we have some ideas that we can put on the table and discuss it? While we have
right. Yeah,
the
I
benefit of
think
the
while
applicant here.
I fundamentally agree with staff about the transparency issue, I agree also with her in the fact that this is a tough act. I think that I guess if I had my druthers, I'd figure out some way to put some windows, but I think that breaking up those vertical panels on the front are going to help, and I think that I would recommend that as a condition of approval to help mitigate the transparency issue. I think making the garage door less obvious, and I would trust staff to work with them to come up with a coloration of that, and also about the surround, how to make that integrate in better so that it isn't quite as noticeable. I think can help. Unfortunately, forgive me for bringing it up, the Bunich building would have never had any windows on that side because there was a building there. And in hindsight, I would, as a community member, would have rather seen that building there than the plaza. I think the building was significant to our downtown, but be that it may, it's gone. We have an opportunity downtown to maybe restore another theater that's still there. So I think that there's not going to be any relief from the Bunich building. It just would have never had windows on that side because the Liberty was right next to it and they had matching walls there. So there's not a whole lot that can be done on that side. The windows that are going to be removed in the existing courthouse, would like to definitely see that as a condition that they be saved and that they be reused elsewhere as they can be reused, because the wood windows are the original windows. But I'm all right with the recesses, and I don't know, maybe adding some more trees to the parking lot would go a long way to sort of helping break up that facade.
There will be
Additional
two trees in
trees.
the
Islands.
It's just not shown in this
Yeah,
rendering.
I park there a lot because we go to McMenamins a lot, and I'm always remarking the fact that there's not too many trees in the parking lot. But I think that would help, and then again, bringing that line across to give the appearance that they're at the same fenestration as the windows on that front elevation, bringing the brick across for a little divider will really help kind of say, oh, there's a similar dimension from the window, and you go over to this dimension, it kind of gives that flavor of
That's
the
the
window.
vertical break that you
Yeah,
talked about
the
initially.
vertical break.
Yeah, and I can provide. I feel like I'm in a historic review board meeting this evening. I have conditions of approval that I think
Okay.
can meet. Hopefully, Carrie Richter's clear and objective standards. But I think the garage door, this brick element, and the existing windows can be added as a condition of approval. And when you're ready, I can let you know what
So
what I've written out.
I hope that helps.
What about my band?
What do you think, Charles?
Well, I agree with everything you said. I would disagree with the suggestion that Damon's made about the band, because I do think that tower, as a transitional element, needs to stand on its own. The verticality of that tower,
Use that word.
really it creates a separation between the existing and the new portion of the building.
I definitely I don't want to give people the appearance that elevator shaft was an original part of the building, and I think, with all due respect, Damon, putting the band on it on that front elevation is going to do that. While it does look a little separate, I think we want it to be separate because we definitely want to distinguish between the new and the old. And the brick won't be exactly the same, but it'll be close enough to the normal person's eye that they'll look at it. You and I will go down there, oh yeah, we know that, we'll be a little more, we'll be looking at it with a little more of a stated eye. But
I also agree with you about reducing the detailing around the garage door. I think if that can be minimized, it's going to draw less attention to it.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. So I'll let you keep the clock if we can get rid of the band. I'm not thrilled about the clock. Again,
I think that's a fair proposal.
And that's why I'm not on the historic review board.
Oh, you could be appointed to that too.
No, I couldn't. You'd be amazed some of the buildings I'd be redesigning.
So at this point, let's see, we have no one from the public to speak. And so I'm wondering,
I have 3 recommended conditions of approval.
Before you do that, can I ask one more question? You did bring up something, Paul, that jogged my memory. I think when I first saw this some years ago, this was a 1-story addition. So there was an increased need to make it go from 1 story to 2 stories to 3 stories because we've got a lot more people that need to be dealt with at the courthouse because they've done some things that maybe need to be looked at by a jury. Or what was?
If you're leading me to an answer there, what I'm going to say is that they're looking at this as a more holistic solution. When they were encapsulating the vehicle transfer, that was just one piece of the puzzle.
I see.
They were still bringing inmates up through the public stairway. They're still distributing very bad criminals through the public hallways to get to a courtroom.
And they still need another courtroom anyway.
And, well, to get another courtroom out of it, they have judges without courtrooms.
Right.
And so, yeah, to get another a courtroom is a valuable piece of real estate in any county right now. And that's where that came from. When we looked at the funding, when we started working on this in 2007, it was still 2 stories, or it was 1 story. Then we had the housing to the side, and it took up a lot of the parking lot, so we looked at putting it above it, and it worked great. And then the funding was there to actually have the secure courtroom, which was the next level of goal, desire, call it what you will. But the funding is there to do a holistic solution to the security problems of that courtroom. It won't solve everything, but it will give them a very safe, secure environment to try somebody.
Well, I appreciate it. I just want that on the record because the McLaughlin neighborhood is going to ask me about this, since what they looked at and what they made a recommendation on was sort of a minimal 1-story structure.
Good question.
They were saying, yes, that looks reasonable. We'll see you when it comes back again. And
Good question.
They
Just a comment that
They will ask.
I have a little bit of experience in this area. Paul and I actually worked at the same architectural firm on detention facilities. And what most people aren't aware of is that the majority of incidents with prisoners either causing a problem or attempting an escape happens during the transfer process. And having a clear, secure passage from the transfer vehicle to the courtroom is the most secure way that they can make that transfer. So I understand the need for having that secure courtroom for high-risk prisoners.
Yeah, if you've ever watched CSI Miami, they just bring them right in there. You know, there's all these people handcuffed, there's no security, and they always have jailbreaks on Law and Order, where that's where they were getting away.
Yep.
Well, and the other thing, too, is over the last 50 years, the nature of how people act in a courtroom has changed. I mean, some people say society's becoming more,
like a circus?
Anarchic or chaotic or whatever. The courtroom decorum is, you might have a fight break out in the hall, but it wouldn't break out in the courtroom, and now you see it all the time. And
They don't act like they used to act on Perry Mason anymore.
No, everybody sat there and just was totally calm, and they also didn't...
Should we go over the conditions?
Please. 10 o'clock. Yeah, we got
So these are my proposed 3 conditions of approval. Add number 7, which is the introduction of a brick element divider on the Liberty Plaza elevation that breaks up the vertical insets to align with existing fenestration. 8, the applicant shall reduce the banding width around the garage to 8 to 10 inches in either brick or stone, and provide a garage door of medium to dark hue to match the building. So I think that's sufficient direction without putting them in a corner.
But they're going to show that to you.
Yeah, and I'll be reviewing that. And 9, the applicant shall save all existing windows proposed to be removed and to be able to be reused on site.
I would so move.
A second.
I
Can we just say aye, and then we're good?
Commissioner Espy.
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Maybe.
Again, reluctantly, aye.
Commissioner Henkin. Commissioner Kidwell.
Aye.
Chair Stein.
Aye.
You. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Go forth
much.
and do good deeds.
Yes. Let's get that designation.
And now we have our work session,
Yes, and I'm still here.
membrane structures.
Let me get out of that.
Yes.
Oh, and before we start our work session, close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Should we have closed the public hearing before we voted?
Technically, yes.
Okay, I just...
I'm going to make a
The
note.
deliberation
I'm going
was
to make
kind
a
of
note on
mixed in
that.
with the
Yes.
I'm going to make a note on your sheet to close the public hearing because it's not here.
Okay, well, or I can amend my sheet.
You should.
If you just look right here.
Yeah.
He can't see that far.
I will amend my sheet.
Yeah, just
Thank you.
one more note, yeah.
All right. This is an update on our membrane structures code and an introduction to the code for some of the new commissioners. In the code update process of last year, the Planning Commission gave pretty clear direction to planning staff to look at further regulating membrane structures. We went through, We went through a number of work sessions and worked with Ms. Richter on providing language that could meet our code and be legal. We involved the CSE and neighborhood associations, but they really did not have any formal comment on the proposed code. We contacted them as many times as we could, but we never see any full support or full opposition bubbling up for this code.
I think only McLaughlin had issues with it, and we supported this because of our new design. I believe we talked about it when the new design guidelines were adopted, and people were had very strong feelings about the fact that we did not feel they belonged within the conservation or historic district.
So you might ask, what is a membrane or fabric-covered structure, or storage area, excuse me. A membrane or fabric-covered storage area is an area covered by a tarp or tension metal or fabric membrane that is either attached to a rigid framework, natural feature, or some other structure that is used for storage. It is not intended to include the weatherproofing of a vehicle, boat, or other individual item by a tarp or other type of covering as long as the covering is attached directly to and covers only the particular item. And I'll show you some, actually, let's go past here. These both are membrane structures. You'll see kind of both types are, these are fabric, but there's also on the bottom, you can also have a metal version of this lower one. And it's
that's
also
also
considered
prohibited?
a membrane structure.
I've seen the metal ones.
These are not membrane structures when used for intended purpose, and that's a Nancy Bush code enforcement big asterisk. You can't tell me that your Home Depot garden arch can't have 47 boxes underneath it because it's not used for its intended purpose. And I'm sure somebody in the city has tried that. But if you notice when it covers on a boat, when you're utilizing outdoor recreation equipment for its intended purpose.
So no storing of my boat in my tent.
No storing of your boat in your tent, or no storing of your all your book collection in your tent outside in your backyard. That's not an intended purpose. So what did this membrane structure code do? Membrane and fabric-covered storage areas, all membrane and fabric-covered structures shall be located behind the front building line of the primary structure, shall not be visible from the abutting right-of-way when viewed at pedestrian level, so not that I'm up here on the hill and I can see down it. This is, I'm walking on any adjacent and, abutting right-of-way. Exceptions to these standards can be made for small, installations. This section became effective January 1, so it was adopted last summer, but it became effective January 1. And most importantly, there is no grandfathering. So I thought because membrane structures are so temporary, it would be very, very hard to regulate if something was put up previously, if it was grandfathered, was not, when January 1 rolled. So there was a large discussion by the Planning Commission about this part being added, and there are consequences to it. Is some people, thought that they were doing something legal and put up a membrane structure, and as of January 1, it is now illegal. So here are some examples of code enforcement that have been processed this spring, provided by Nancy Bush with our code enforcement department, and there's some very good photos I'd like to show. Some existing examples that they were able to get down because of our very explicit code.
That would be a failed membrane structure.
So this is an example of a metal membrane structure that was able to be taken down.
That looks kind of a little bit like Appalachia.
It exists here. Here's some before and after. So before, showing these metal membrane structures.
Oh, my Lord.
After, gone. Before, showing a fabric version.
Ooh.
After, gone. Before
I remember
and
that
after. So how is this regulation enforced? The regulation is enforced on a complaint basis. The complaint hotline. Once a complaint is received, the property owner will be requested to remove the offending structure, and like all municipal code violations, they can be sent to civil court for further action for noncompliance. I had a conversation with Nancy Bush. She wasn't able to make it this evening, but I wanted to kind of go through her comments, and I think they kind of illuminate some of their issues and why they're really happy with this code. They believe that the code has worked so well so far. She wanted to let you know that while residents that want to have the debate that their structures can have their debate at a commission level, it's their right to do so. She's speaking, I do not believe that the city wants to enter into the debate of which property has a nice structure and which does not, and which should be grandfathered and which should not. Metal structures rust. There's no guarantee that the current or new property owner will maintain it in the future. Fabric structures are appealing until that first windstorm. There are also no guarantees that the new or existing property owner will maintain these structures. And the majority of fabric structures are recovered and patched with what is available, such as tarp and duct tape, which code enforcement generally saw. She believes that membrane structures create walls which conceal criminal behavior from public view and may obstruct the view of the right-of-way from the primary structure or vice versa, creating potential hazards. Garages and sheds can generally withstand the elements and may be secured to prevent entry and meet some type of setback requirement. And in general, clean, well-maintained properties free of obstructions, including vegetation, promote healthy neighborhoods and neighborhoods where citizens can feel safe and criminals don't. That sounds like a very Nancy Bush statement.
And along those lines, I mean, the biggest problem with membrane structures is that they're generally not secured. So in a windstorm, okay, you don't care that your book collection gets wet because it blew away. But your neighbor next door cares that it just went blasting through his big picture window and is now destroyed his living room.
Or potentially in the right-of-way.
His car, or whatever.
Yeah, and that's hard because there are some very well, nicely maintained ones, and that is the kind of the crux of this code is that the city has decided not to get into that debate.
To the design element, yes.
Debate of yes, you've been maintaining your membrane structure well, you're okay. No, you have not been. Yours looks junky, therefore it's not allowed. So the way this was written is it's very clear and objective, and there's really no way out. So you will be hearing discussions from potential violators who may kind of want to explain why they've kept their membrane structures up. It's well maintained. It's it has a purpose, and the direction we received from the Planning Commission and also code enforcement was really the only way to do this is through a very, very clear and objective process.
Are these things inexpensive, like the metal ones?
No, they can be quite expensive.
No, you go down to the...
But the metal ones can be quite expensive, and that's some of we may be seeing some of these coming up in future code enforcements where people have paid a fair amount of money for them. And they thought that, they asked it was permitted, and now it's not, and so they'll have to be removing it. And, I mean, that is a situation. But some are very cheap and can be, obtained through the local home improvement store, and some are a lot more intensive. But both the metal and the fabric membrane are not allowed.
But based on your reading of the code, they would be allowed behind the house?
If
or
they
were
can't
not
be
visible?
viewed. And they can't be viewed, that's, for the most part, almost 100% can't be viewed. And so a lot of these, especially in existing subdivisions, not kind of larger lots with lots of vegetation, which do exist, but more in your traditional built subdivision, it's actually really hard to hide a one-story metal building. You generally still can see some of it.
Well,
from behind the...
Some of the subdivisions have, they're enforced by their homeowners association, and they don't allow them
Correct,
at
but
all.
a lot are not enforced.
No, a lot of them are not enforced. I know.
So has there been some publicity or article written for, say, like the Trail News or flyers for Home Depot and those things? Is it possible that there's staff resource to put together a picture and a few words that could be put into that publication?
That's certainly something we could look into to do.
At the very least, having somebody in code enforcement go talk to Home Depot and have them inform them if you're an Oregon City resident, spending $5,000 or whatever on a structure that you have to take down in 20 days is.
All it would really take is something that they could post to say,
Yeah.
a permit may be required for this, or you may not be able to put, something like that.
Check with your local code.
Code,
if the
yeah.
purchasing says item.
I don't even know if it exists anymore, but years ago we had a problem with, there's an establishment, I believe, along Clackamas River Drive that sells little barn-like structures, and we were having lots of problems with those just sort of appearing, and even though they were around 200 square feet, they would stick them in the setback, and we sent our code compliance down there just to tell the owners, hey, folks, we don't have any problems. You want to sell these, but you should have a disclaimer just to protect yourself, because what was happening is people were going back, well, I thought I could put this in there. And they said, well, that's not my problem. So we suggested they put up a disclaimer.
Yep. Christine?
Yeah. In the packet, you saw a draft memo that we have available, and we're looking at ways that we can get that out as well.
Yeah, I think a picture's worth 1,000 words.
This is the frequently asked questions with the memorandum.
The two-pager.
Yeah.
Yeah, drop those off at Home Depot.
So this was put together in response to the request that you received about a month and a half ago on the residents in Kenema that kind of got caught up into some code enforcement issues with surrounding properties. Our recommendation would be that this was a long discussed policy decision. It came up at Planning Commission multiple years on multiple times, and the decision was finally made to move forward with that. We would recommend at this point that we not change it and open it up to further interpretation, as Christina was saying, of which ones we're going to allow, which ones we're not. I think that we made that decision that we're going to move forward with this and apply it unilaterally and consistently throughout the city. And I think that's probably the best way to do it.
I would
concur.
concur.
I think backed up
with
with these publications, to be able to have this available for people to look at online, the memorandum that you put together, maybe a notice in the Trail News, but just kind of...
It's a one-pager, maybe including it in the water bill, because it'll be homeowners that'll be getting it, as opposed to who cares about the guy who's got the 15-unit apartment building. He probably doesn't have these structures, but...
We'll look at ways
That is a good idea.
to
I like the
advertise
idea
it.
of the
Christine,
water
do you
bill.
have anything else?
Nope, I was just more of an update, and I think some people are new, so I think Tony was inferring that it's our recommendation to continue to move forward with this code. I think we were looking for direction back from the Planning Commission that they agree.
You're not going to find me changing my...
Yeah, I agree.
I would just suggest that you get this published to all the neighborhood committees so that they have it available, and Home Depot and Lowe's and any other outlet that's selling these, so that, as Denise said, they didn't spend $5,000 and get it home and find out they got to take it down in a month.
Yeah, especially, and I'd say do it soon, because this is building season. When those are going to pop up, or in early September when they decide they want to put their leaves underneath it as a compost.
Yeah,
And I like that
Yeah.
it allows me to have my greenhouse in the backyard.
Is it visible from the street?
No, you
The
can
top
have
of it
greenhouses.
is.
Ooh, we better.
You can have greenhouses.
We'll
and
go over
gardening
and check it out.
Yeah. So thank you. Shall we adjourn? It's
I was
past
just going
10
to say,
o'clock.
once you decide that this is not a draft anymore, would you be willing to send me a copy? I would love to put this in our neighborhood newsletter.
Absolutely, and we most likely will, once it's not a draft, we'll probably create as a PDF to access on the normal planning pages.
Perfect. That'd be great. Thank you for that.
And
And,
when you do put it in when it is ready to go post, make sure it gets on the front page of the Oregon City thing, new info on membrane structure or whatever,
Yeah.
just so that there's, the link to it, because
we don't need to make a motion on this or anything that we continue to support this. We just are saying by faith promptly that the Planning
Yep.
Commission continues to support this, and it's in the code, overdone.
Yep.
That's it?
That's
we would have to
the
make a
purpose
motion
of our
to
work
change
session.
our
All right.
session.
Yep.
And it's also that request that was brought forward by the Kenema resident, we will not be bringing back to the Planning
No,
Commission.
thank you. We're
Great.
sorry, but
It's unfortunate for the people who got caught, but
Always check,
every
always
time
check,
you're
always check.
enforcing
Tony,
the
thank
rule.
you very much for your work tonight.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Always check.
And you
That's
too,
what I say.
Christina. And you.
Carter,
Thanks,
you wanna-
Christine.
You want to whack your gavel there?
Yeah.
There you go. Shoot, now it's official.
There we go.